Net, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very good. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this evening's meeting of the San Carlos Planning Commission to order. Our first agenda item, as always, is our Pledge of Allegiance. So if you stand and please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof,
Here.
Commissioner Garvey,
Present.
and new Planning Commissioner Janet Castaneda. Welcome.
Present.
Commissioner Clements, Vice Chair Clements, is out this evening. She is not feeling well. Chair Iacopone.
Present. Very good. Well, again, good evening, everyone. And on behalf of my other colleagues who are a little seasoned here on the Planning Commission, I'd like to welcome our brand new colleague, Commissioner Castaneda, to our group. We'll look forward to years of your wisdom and joining and helping us shape the important policies here in the city. So good to have you.
Thank you.
Very good. So let's see. First, tonight, for those who are remote, we're offering, as we always do, remote participation. Our very first item is our public comment period. Public comment is limited to items that are not on tonight's agenda. The Commission may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed as allowed by the Brown Act, Government Code Section 54954.2. However, the Commission's general policy is to refer items to staff for attention or have the matter placed on future Commission agenda for a more comprehensive action or report. So let's start with here in the room. Are there any individuals present who would like to raise something not on tonight's agenda? And seeing none, Lynette, are there any callers that would like to make a point or a comment?
We have one hand raised. It is Debbie. And Debbie, you will be unmuted.
Good evening, Debbie. And this is with regard to the public comment and for items not on tonight's agenda. So please,
Yes.
2 minutes.
Thank you. I pulled up the agenda for this meeting and there is in red cancellation notice saying that the meeting has been canceled. So is the meeting canceled or are you going forward?
This is Lisa Porras, Planning Manager, responding here. The meeting is agendized. I'm not sure what happened or what link Debbie may have referred to, but we did check, and everything has been posted online in accordance with the noticing procedures, so this meeting can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Okay, Debbie?
Yes, I just worry that people want to attend and they pulled up the agenda and saw that it was canceled. I will send to Crystal a screenshot of what I saw that shows that it's canceled. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so in the absence of further public comment at this time.
We actually have another hand that just went up.
Yep.
This is
please, Lynette.
David. David, you are now unmuted.
Hello. Just wanted to add to what Debbie was saying. I saw a similar thing. I think it was related to the new interface to viewing the agenda and opening individual items from the agenda from the HTML view. I think all those kind of sub views have a note at the top that says the meeting is canceled. If that helps the debug. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
There are no additional hands raised at this time.
Thank you, Lynette. Are we okay to proceed, do you think? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Well, from my understanding from staff, and staff can correct me if I'm misstating what happened, it looks like we do have a new interface called, that's through Prime Gov, and the agenda was posted at City Hall as required, and then the agenda, I just looked at the agenda packet earlier this afternoon and didn't have any trouble seeing the agenda and the packet. So from time to time, there's a technical difficulty, but that doesn't mean that we're not in compliance with the law on noticing the meeting, because it was posted and the agenda was posted on the web, and we will look into how that happened. I don't know if I'm not a techie person, so we'll have to figure out how that could have happened, whether like some subfolders might have had a test message or something like that. These things can happen from time to time, but we'll work through that.
Yeah, thank you for your patience, Chair and Commission. We just discovered that the HTML version, and this is correct, this is a new system that the city is using called Prime, and the rest of the agenda has been posted correctly within the agenda packet and the regular agenda that you can download, but there is an HTML version, and there's something in that version that is not correct, and it does refer to city council members, so there's definitely some glitch that happened, but the remaining materials and the posting of the agenda in the glass case and all the other noticing we do for the projects is correct. So it's just this one particular HTML version that needs to get adjusted, but we can proceed.
Okay, thank you very much for helping us sort that out. So tonight, I think we're closing our public comment period, and I'll just ask Lynette one more time if there are any other hands raised virtually.
There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. We're going to make one slight order change in tonight's agenda, and we are going to move to agenda item 7A and proceed with that first. So I think we have a very short staff presentation.
Yakaboni, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Rucha Dande, Associate Planner. So the first item before you tonight is to set an appeal hearing date. Just to give you a little bit of background, on August 25th, 2022, an appeal to the Planning Commission was filed for the RDRC's August 15 decision for the project at 703 Knoll Drive. So at today's meeting, staff is requesting to set an appeal hearing date for this project for October 17, 2022, pursuant to the appeal code section, which specifically states that the appeal shall be scheduled for consideration by the authorized hearing body within 45 days of the date of the appeal. So here is the motion before you tonight, should you decide to schedule it to October 17, 2022.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff for any of the commissioners? Okay, hearing none. Would anyone like to propose a motion?
I move that the Planning Commission set the appeal hearing date for the 703 Knoll Drive APP 2022-0 0002 to Monday, October 17th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Through the chair, sorry to interrupt. Maybe before we make the motion, we can just check to see if there's anybody who wants to comment, if there's a comment on this item.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry about that. I should have
No,
prompted you.
that's all right.
We don't do this all the time.
No,
so.
that's all right. So let's, thank you for the motion, and before we proceed with a second and a vote, are there any people present or online who would like to comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, very good. And I see none here in the room. And do we need to vote on closing public comment? Okay,
No, it's not a public hearing, so you don't.
very good.
I will second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Castaneda,
Yes.
and Chair Iacoponi.
Yes. Thank you. Very good. So we're going to take a look at our minutes, approval of the minutes. Are there any comments from the Planning Commission with regard to the minutes of the meeting from September 6, 2022? I see none, and none for me.
I will move approval of the minutes from the Planning Commission of September 6th, 2022.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof,
Abstain because I wasn't present.
Commissioner Garvey,
Yes.
and Commissioner Castaneda,
Abstain.
and Chair Iacoponi.
Yes.
Well, this is kind of one of those unusual circumstances. Technically, people who are not at the meeting can still vote to approve the minutes. You don't have to abstain if you're not absent. If people do feel uncomfortable on the commission about doing that, we could wait till we have a full commission to approve the minutes. Is there any reason that we need to approve these minutes tonight?
No.
Okay. So that's your options. You could, those who abstained could vote to approve the minutes, or if you feel uncomfortable with that, we can just continue it to the next meeting until we have 5 commissioners.
Well, I did read them, and so I would be comfortable approving them. I can change my vote. It would be yes.
Yes, you can change your vote.
I'll hold you to that later.
Okay, thank you. So noted. The minutes have passed. Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, so we have now entered the public hearing phase of our evening, and I have to acknowledge, Lisa, you asked that we approve the minutes before we do 7A, but we got those out of sync. But here we are. So we're going to now do 6A, and the public hearing format is that staff will present a report on the history, physical feature, et cetera, on the application, followed with staff's recommendations. The applicant will make a presentation, and thereafter interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a hearing in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers should state their name prior to addressing the commission. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. So this evening, the first item we have is a request for a planned development zoning. a plan development plan, a development agreement, design review, and transportation demand management plan, and a grading and dirt hauling certificate for the property located at 405 Industrial Road, APN 046-051-080. Lisa, you have a presentation for us?
Thank you. Good evening. Lisa Costa-Sanders, Principal Planner. The item before you, 405 Industrial, is introduced by the chair. What do I need to do? Okay, thank you. As you introduced the item, there's many entitlements associated with this, and we'll walk through those this evening. So the subject site at 405 Industrial is located at the northeast corner of Holly and Industrial Road behind the In-N-Out Burger. It's currently occupied with public storage buildings. The property is a 2.41 acre flag lot with a driveway entrance from Industrial Road. The site is zoned landmark commercial with a general plan designation of general commercial industrial. The site is located within the northernmost end of the East Side Innovation District Plan area, and it is not covered within the moratorium, and it will not be under study for the Northeast Side Specific Plan Study Area. So the request this evening, the applicant has submitted plans to develop a new 92,615 square foot research and development life science building with 6 floors above grade, which includes 2 levels of parking, as well as there will be 2 levels of below grade parking and site landscape improvements. The entitlements include plan development zoning, plan development plan, a development agreement, design review, grading and dirt haul, transportation demand management plan, and a mitigated negative declaration. So this is the landscape site plan. And as you see, the site has a 2-lane driveway access from Industrial Road, as well as a 5-foot wide sidewalk connecting to the building entrance. There is a fire lane that runs along the entire perimeter of the building. And there's a variety of mature landscaping already existing along Holly Street and at the off-ramp. I'll start with the first item as the plan development zoning and the plan development plan. So the project complies with the underlying zoning with the exception of a few items, and that is height, floor area, and landscaping. So for the height, the underlying zoning has a maximum height limit of 50 feet, and the request is to allow the new building at a height of 86 feet 10 inches to the top of the parapet and 90 feet 10 inches to the top of the roof equipment and screen. Floor area, that's the ratio of the building area to the lot. The maximum for the site is currently a 2.0 floor area. And the request is to establish that at 2.79, and that's for the entire above grade building area, which does include 2 levels of parking. Landscaping, the current requirement is 15% of the site area be landscaped. The applicant requests 8% of the site area. And then the sign area, this is not a deviation from the code, but just to provide some clarity, the code doesn't establish a maximum for sign programs, so we thought it'd be appropriate to include that in this. So it's a total of 350 square feet, and that's distributed throughout the signs on the property, including a new monument sign and wall signs. None of the signs are proposed to face, the wall signs are not proposed along the Industrial Road frontage. And then for the uses, it would be all uses allowed in the landmark commercial zoning district, whether permitted or conditional, would be carried forward with this zoning, and as well establish research and development as a permitted use, and limit future tenants to biosafety level 1 or 2. Walking through the development agreement, in consideration of the rezoning, the applicant proposes to provide the city with community benefits. This includes off-site landscape improvements along Industrial Road, and that's to further the East Side Innovation District plan of a green boulevard along Industrial. As in addition, a contribution of $4.2 million to the city in community benefits. The use of these funds would ultimately be determined by the City Council, but it is recommended to be utilized in the greater East Side neighborhood and could include traffic calming measures, park improvements, or additional neighborhood landscaping. In addition to the $4.2 million in community benefits, the applicant will be required to pay city impact fees. The commercial linkage fee is for affordable housing, sewer connection and capacity fees, traffic impact fee that would further improvements that have already been identified by the city, and the newly adopted child care impact fee. And that totals $7.5 million. All right, so for design review, this is the view from the corner of Holly Street and Industrial Road. The applicant is proposing to enhance the landscaping at that corner. And as you see here, the building is designed in 6 stories above grade with a step back at the 6th floor with an outdoor balcony. So the thought is that would provide some relief along the Industrial Road, is to have that step back at the upper level. This is a view of the building if you're driving into that driveway and you're just about to enter the building. You see the in and out drive-through on that side there. And here you can see the breaks and the variation in the glass, the entry columns with the covered entry to the lobby, as well as a mix of metal panels at the 1st floor, and another view of the step back that does include a landscape planter area. And then this is the view if you're coming off Holly Street at the 101 off-ramp. So you see the design of the building steps back to follow the curve of the lot. Another entitlement for Planning Commission review is the grading and dirt haul. The site grading is necessary for the 2 levels of below-grade parking, estimated at 49,600 cubic yards of soil. A little over 4,000 truckloads would off-haul over a 34-day period, and that grading operation would be follow the recommendations of the geotechnical report. Another item for Planning Commission is the Transportation Demand Management Plan. As you know, this is required to reduce trips by 20%. And the applicant has a variety of measures that are included in the TDM plan. There's some bike parking on site, as well as some on-site amenities that include showers. There's a cafe and a gym proposed on site for the tenants as well. And then there would be commuter program management and on-site trip planning resources. We've prepared an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration as required under the Environmental Quality Act. And that study found that the project will not have impacts with implementation of the mitigation measures. Those relate to aesthetics, requiring light sensors and automatic shades along that west-facing elevation. Air quality, this is relating during the course of construction. Biological, to have bird-safe glazing, and if there's to be any tree removal. Cultural resources is also during the course of construction, as well as geological. And the transportation, we've included a mitigation measure to ensure implementation of the TDM, as well as monitoring. The mitigated negative declaration was available for a 30-day public review period from August 9th through September 8th. And during that time, we received 3 letters of comment. And those letters, as well as responses to the comments, are included in the attachment to the CEQA resolution. Mitigation measures that are required to be adopted are also included as an attachment to the CEQA resolution. A traffic study was completed to evaluate any safety potential impacts to nearby intersections, in addition to the newly required vehicle miles traveled analysis. That traffic study did not find any impacts with the proposed development. The notice of this public hearing was mailed to property owners and occupants within 300 feet of the site on September 8th, published in the newspaper on September 9th, and also posted at the site. We received 2 comment letters expressing concern with the project and 1 comment letter expressing support, and that comment letter, I believe, was separately emailed to all commissioners. Thank you. This is the formal motion, should you choose to make it, and I just want to clarify that you're the recommending body on the plan development zoning, plan development plan, and the development agreement, as well as the CEQA, the mitigated negative declaration. You would be the deciding body on the design review, transportation demand management plan, and the grading and dirt haul. Those 3 entitlements would not be effective until the zoning is effective. I'd be happy to try to answer any of your questions. The applicant is also here this evening with a presentation. We have the fire marshal in the audience as well to answer any questions, and I believe online we have the traffic consultant and the CEQA consultant. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. A lot of very good content. So before we go out for public comment, want to see if any of the commissioners have any clarifying questions of what they've heard or what they read. Commissioner Garvey, please.
Thank you, Chair Iacopone. One question, Lisa. When the airport reviewed the project, I'm assuming they looked at the height of the building and made sure that it met their regulations. There was a glare report that I read through in the packet. Did the airport also get a chance to look at the glare report, and were they okay with that as well?
So that was included as part of the mitigated negative declaration that was publicly available, but we did not separately send it to the airport or the CCAG, which is the Airport Land Use Compatibility Review Authority. So they didn't have any comments or review on it. They were pretty satisfied with the project as far as compatibility with the Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, and that relates to height, use, and that it did not present any issues with a bird-safe design or present any hazards. So there's no flashing lights or anything that would be hazardous for the airplanes. And it was also reviewed by the FAA. Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Castaneda, Commissioner Roof. Please.
I read about the bike access that would be provided and pedestrian walkways. Are there any road improvements or changes contemplated?
There's none that were recommended as part of a mitigation measure. None were found required, and none that were kind of negotiated as part of a community benefit. But there is a very large improvement project that is planned at that intersection at Holly and 101, a new bike overpass, and then also changes to we'll call it the Cloverleaf, the access to the freeway. So that's been planned for quite some time. We're just working on the funding for it.
Maybe two for me. For the first, can you just remind us what biosafety levels 1 and 2 entail? If you recall, I know there's been some comments about what will actually be going on in the building, manufacturing or something, and just good to have that.
Okay, so a brief description. Biosafety level 1 are labs used to study infectious agents or toxins not known to consistently cause disease in healthy adults. Biosafety level 2 study moderate risk infection agents or toxins that pose a risk if accidentally inhaled, swallowed, or exposed to the skin. And there's design and safety measures that go along with this, and there's obviously other agencies that would be involved in the review and permitting as well. I believe County Environmental Health is very involved, Bay Area Air Quality. The applicant may have more details as well. And then those are the two that we would consider to be permitted. Above that, biohazard safety level 3 are labs to study infectious agents or toxins that may be transmitted through the air and cause potentially lethal infection through inhalation exposure. And level 4, labs used to study infectious agents or toxins that pose a high risk of aerosol transmitted laboratories infections and life-threatening disease for which no vaccine or therapy is available. So based on our research, there are biohazard safety level 3s in San Mateo County, I believe specifically South San Francisco, but we're not aware of any biohazard safety level 4s existing in the state of California.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful context, just so we understand the different gradations. Great. The other question that I had was, we're being asked to approve a reduction or a waiver, I guess, in landscaping from 15% to 8%. There is a lot of surface parking as well as in-building parking. Can you just link for us the amount of parking, the required parking spaces, and then how that is linked to the landscaping?
Certainly. So let me look at the exact numbers, but the project does exceed the minimum required parking for the site, especially when you apply the TDM requirements. And that's based on what's currently proposed as a lab and office ratio. So we have different parking requirements. For lab space is 1 parking space for every 800 square feet of lab area, and office is regulated at 1 per 300. So when you take an assumption, I think it's 60%, 40% lab and office, you would have a total of 431 spaces. Now that's an estimate by the applicant. As you know, we talked about this with another project. The ultimate tenant would come in later and may have a different ratio of spaces. So the base requirement's 431. When you apply the transportation demand management plan, you get a 20% reduction for that. And so our code would be 345 spaces. The applicant is proposing a total of 474. And that's a mix of regular parking spaces, tandem spaces, and a few motorcycle spaces. Most of those are located within the building, below grade, above grade, and there's just a few spaces that are located along the driveway. Maybe 8, and I can have the applicant clarify. I'm just kind of estimating here. 6 to 8, something like that, yeah. So that would be an area that could be enhanced with additional landscaping. The other limiting factor on the site for landscaping is the fire access road.
Thank you. And maybe I didn't, for my part, didn't appreciate the limited number of, I'll call it, outside of the building, building perimeter parking spaces. You know, if it's 8 or 10, then that's not much space devoted to parking. No more questions for my part. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you. I think with that, we'll move to the public comment period. If there is anyone in the room that has a comment that they'd like to raise, if they could.
I think the applicant would like to give a presentation first. Thank you. And you can use this to advance the slides. It just might give her a minute to pull it up.
Okay. Left and right?
Just that arrow, yeah.
Okay.
Just a second.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Jane Vaughn. I'm with Menlo Equities, and we're the owner of the proposed project. I'm not going to duplicate what Lisa said. What I'm going to do is try and walk through how we came up with the design we came up with, how it evolved, and what the logic was. You know, it's a great site from the perspective of freeway visibility, has great access to the freeway. It is also within a commutable distance to the Caltrans station, either biking or walking. So those are the benefits of it. And you can sort of see the existing site is a mini sort surrounded on all sides. The issues that we had to work with is there's just a single entry going in. The site is zoned commercial, which would allow office, retail, or a hotel. It's a landmark, a site, which was to be given special treatment because it's the gateway of the city. Very difficult to have retail on this site, as the entire frontage is largely the in and out. And, you know, if you own a hotel, you have a retail shop, you sort of want your hotel to be on the street, not the in and out. So it really puts the use into the office category. One of the benefits of life science is that you have a lot less people in the building and a lot less traffic. Scientist has an office and he has a space in the lab. That's part of the reason why the traffic impact is not a problem. Lisa alluded to the fact that there's lower parking. We have a little bit more of a parking count because tandem spaces aren't that attractive. And, you know, the motorcycle spaces, how much value do they have? And we also promised our neighbors that we would not have overflow parking into their area. So we wanted to make sure we had sufficient parking. This is what you look at, the in and out queue. It's going to be there every time they're open. On this side of Caltrans, you have, fortunately, in some regards, a nice green backdrop, but in other regards, you know, they got fence with wire on top. So what that means for us is when you're standing on the site and you do a 360, it is not attractive. And I'll tell you how that factors into our design. We're part of the East Side Vision Plan. Vision Plan was talked about for a good long year on how the East Side would get redeveloped, and we're a key part of it, and we're in keeping with what the Vision Plan envisioned for this site. So I already mentioned retail and hotels aren't attracted. Residential is not permitted as a result of the airport proximity. What we did to sort of deal with what we considered were the impediments to the site is we lifted the building up 2 floors. So the 3rd floor partially overlooks, but the remaining floors overlook the in and out building and overlook the freeway ramps. And then we put parking levels underneath. And the logic there is if you want a company to come, stay there long term, be a viable tenant for us, a viable participant in your community, you got to produce space that is leasable, usable, and attractive. And so lifting it up caused us 2 problems. We hit the height limitation, and it also impacted our FAR. You know, Lisa alluded to the 2.7 FAR. The actual permitted FAR is 2.0 or 210,000 square feet. Most cities use FAR to talk about occupiable space. We're at 206 square feet of office on our floors. The 2.7 because the city counts the unoccupiable parking, which is atypical. So in my mind, we are within what was intended for the occupiable space of this building. That's what we targeted. And the fact that the parking is counted, it's the same problem of lifting the building up to deal with the unattractive vista if we left it at grade. So that is sort of what we did to reach out and make the building viable for the marketplace, which we also think benefits the community. The more stable company we have, the more likely they produce revenues for the community. But we also looked at what can we do to make this building palatable to the East Side residential. As many of you know, there are some interest in not having higher buildings. So let's walk through that a little bit. First thing we did is we set back the top floor so that when you're looking at the building from industrial, it looks like 3 stories over the parking instead of 4. That helps in some regards because as you go down industrial, the height of the Sutter Health building is 70 feet. The height of our 5 stories, the setback not being counted, is about the same. So there's a visual continuity, and we don't look like we're totally out of sync with what's happening on the street. What's happening in the East Side Vision Plan, the existing buildings down the street that were approved and are built are about the exact same height as ours. So we're not stretching the community to go where the East Side Vision Plan, or at least the existing approvals, haven't already done. We're almost, 2 inches different. So let's just call that exactly the same. So I had mentioned that we wanted to make sure with regard to the East Side neighbors, we heard what they had to say about parking, and we adhered to that. More importantly, we also heard that they really didn't want to see that in and out sign duplicated in our building. And so we went through a lot of glare studies, and this is an accurate representation of what the building would look like at night with the design measures we put in place. The design measures are, we have automatic shades that come down at sunset and then come up at sunrise. So not your choice, and it's done on all sides of the building. So, the airport didn't raise this issue, but it's not just the west facade. We think that would look bizarre to have, half of it glare and half of it not. So it's all done where the glare will totally be reduced. Our light specification for the internal lights is indirect, which means they're up and down versus outward. And then lastly, we will not be putting any illuminated building signage on the industrial road side. We think it does a terrific job of really reducing the amount of glare and the noticeable look from the residential houses on the other side. So just to touch quickly on some of the issues, there was a lot of discussion over the soil. The soil is not contaminated, does not need remediated, and it poses no health hazard. That's specified by our environmental engineers. We've had community members weigh in and agree, and it meets all the standards of the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Traffic, Lisa's already commented on that, and the traffic engineers here, but one of the reasons the traffic has less of an impact is because life science has less people in the building. The height, as I've already said, we have put design features in place to really take a look at the height. One of the things that we did is, who is this going to impact the most? So the circles shown up there are houses on Fairfield. That's the closest street to us. There is some buffer, not tons, in and out the street, and there's a little row of industrial buildings, and then it curves away. But Fairfield Avenue, those are the houses that are going to be close. So we did some renderings. What does it look like if you're on the residential? This is Springfield looking down Fairfield. You can see the building in the background, but it is in the background. As you get closer, it's a little bit more prominent, but it's not overwhelming. It doesn't look down on the neighborhood. The terrace doesn't look down on the neighborhood. And certainly at night, it won't be glaring out. Taking a look at Sylvan, that's the next street over. Again, looking towards Fairfield, you can see it. As you get closer, all of these pictures are helped by mature trees in the neighborhood. This is another view from Riverton at the end. I'm going to go back just a couple of slides. All of these people who I've circled those houses, they've all written a support letter saying that they've reviewed the project, they think the design is good, and they're more than happy with the height of it. Just to step back a little bit on the design, we submitted this project in June of 2001, over a year ago. We've been working with staff and the neighbors on the design since then. It has been a cooperative process of what looks good, what works for us, and what works for the neighbors. I'm not going to spend much on the end, but there are community benefits that go to the neighborhood to use what they want. We have substantial amounts of fees that, between childcare, affordable housing, that will make a huge impact to the community. The other thing is the size of this building is based on attracting what we consider a medium-sized, stable, possibly headquarters life science company. And we want that because we want one tenant in the building. We want them to lease long-term. We want them to pay attention to the traffic demand management programs, and we want them to be part of the community, hire interns, attend events, and that you need a reasonable size company. Emerging companies, startups don't have HR departments. They can't manage any of that. So the size of this is meant to be a reasonable size company, and it is at the gateway to the city. And if there's one spot where you should have a pretty sizable statement building, this one's it. The impacts to traffic are able to be accommodated, and we think that what the building looks like from the neighborhood's perspective is as reasonable as it can be, given what the community thinks that should be done in the east side. Lastly, I didn't mention lots of new jobs, both construction and, you know, long-term biotech. In fact, I think there was a letter of support put in by the building trades, which a fair amount of their members are San Carlos residents. Anyway, that is the sum total of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to make one note on the landscaping. Because we've raised our building up, there's not a whole lot of point to putting landscaping at grade, especially since we're surrounded by trees. We do have landscaping on our terrace. We are landscaping the corner of Industrial Holly. If you add that in, it puts our landscaping up to 12%, significantly more. We are replacing trees along industrial roads, or I don't have to count that as landscaping. So we just felt that rather than putting our landscaping in areas that wouldn't be appreciated, wouldn't hold up well, let's put it on the corner in other spots where it makes an impact in the community or makes an impact to the building. You don't count landscaping on terrace. Well, it's important to the occupant of the building. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much. That was a really helpful presentation. Maybe for fellow commissioners, are there questions for our applicant?
I do have one clarifying question for the applicant. I really like the bike pedestrian path that leads to the corner of Holly and Industrial. Seems like it'll clear up, make flow for bikes and pedestrians a lot nicer. But it's listed in the application as optional.
Wow.
So if that's my question. If Caltrans issues a permit, are you committed to doing that?
We are 100% committed to doing that. In fact, the tricky part is how far am I going to have to push Caltrans to get them to agree to this? People who know me know that, you know, I'm not a shrinking violet. The only reason I put that in there is if we get held up by Fish and Game, because there turns out to be a lizard in the ditch, or some other environmental thing that cannot be solved, then we will not be able to do it. We do not own the land, Caltrans does. At this point in time, we don't see any, we haven't heard that those issues are there. But we feel not only will it help support biking, it will be a big benefit to the building. Yeah, it's not very helpful to give the hotel after-hours uses of your space if they have to walk the whole way around and in. But if the valet guy can scoot in the back, it really does make the parking, the building, the biking, the walking a lot better. We're going to do our best to get it through.
Thank you very much. Further follow-up?
One more question. That barbed wire isn't very sightly, but I'm wondering, I never see barbed wire around interchanges other places, and I'm wondering whether maybe that's put up by the self-storage people and you could take it down?
Let me see if that picture shows the drainage ditch. What you don't see, you can see it sort of in the right, there's like the little shiny, that's a drainage ditch. I think that Caltrans put that up so that people didn't go over from our site and then stumble down into the drainage ditch. But I'm not sure, I didn't ask them. It is totally unattractive.
Thank you. Commissioners?
One question. Thank you, Chair Iacopone. Thanks for your presentation. Can you add a bit more detail to the landscaping on the terrace? When I look at the renderings, it shows mature, even small trees or very large bushes. You know, these aren't little 3-inch pansies. Can you add a little bit more detail to what you're anticipating up there? Because it seems to me that if it was mature enough, would serve to really soften the view for people looking at the building.
So I don't have but some member of the community had asked us about, could you be up on the terrace and would you be looking down in our yards? I think the distance is such that that would be difficult, but The planters, I'm just going to have to pass this out since I don't have it electronically. The planters serve several purposes. It prevents you from viewing out down. It allows you to view out to the mountains, which we think is attractive. It will also provide an environment that is much more green in the 6th floor. So there's greenery around the outside edge, and then there's a row of planters. So there's a double row. That I know because I just calculated that square footage for the numbers I quoted. So it is pretty plush up there. And we decided it was better to put our landscaping there than on grade. But that doesn't meet the official definition of landscaping. So, Lisa wouldn't have counted that. I added it in.
Commissioner Castaneda, did you want to ask the applicant a question?
Yes. Could you comment on the specifications for the glass? I read about it for the bird strike mitigation. Is that throughout all of the glass in the building?
Yes. So this building actually is a combination of vision glass and then spandrel glass. Spandrel glass means that there's a coating behind the glass. And if you look up even in that view, there's like a striped feel to it. It's subtle, and it depends how the sun hits. Well, the spandrel glass prevents the birds from flying into it. It's the very clear vision glass that is a problem. Our vision glass isn't that light. We balance between what looks good, what satisfies, prevents enough shading so that the birds can see it. And then we have energy requirements. We control light in and out by the glass we use. So I don't think we will have an issue whatsoever given the amount of spandrel glass, as well as our vision glass is fairly opaque. I shouldn't say opaque, but it's darker.
Thank you.
Commissioner Roof.
I have a question regarding the traffic management plan. And I saw that there was a TDM conducted according to the standard methodology, and that the traffic is expected to be accommodatable. But that left turn out of there, just from personal experience, I know it's a little bit hairy. And so one question I have is, can there be one of these lanes in the middle of the road that you pull into when you're making a left turn? Is that part of the plan, or is that possible?
So that actually exists. I didn't bring that exhibit, but as you come out of here, there is a middle lane that stacks 4 or 5 cars, but still allows a space for in and out to get out. The fortunate thing is right after that are 2 very long left turn lanes on Industrial. Will there be some queuing? Possibly. But as the traffic engineer told me, it's all going to be on our site. So if you're an employee and you don't want to queue, you pay attention and you wait 10 minutes, come 10 minutes early. They don't think that there will be more than 5 or 10 cars that will queue up. Just because of varied work hours, you just don't, everybody doesn't, it's not like the 1950s where everybody left at 5. It just doesn't happen anymore.
And the second question, maybe this is for city staff, but if I wanted to turn right and then make a U-turn at the traffic light that's a short distance down north on the road, is no U-turns? I believe Lisa told me no.
U-turns are permitted.
So could U-turns be permitted at that light?
They are. At least I thought so. Was the traffic consultant here? I actually asked him about this intersection and getting out, because I had the same thought you had. And he said, you can take the right, go to the middle lane. He said you can make a U-turn at the traffic light that is at Sutter Health. So if you got impatient, you could take that right and then just make a U-turn. So it does provide another means to get out and some easing of the queuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for the applicant? I had a question, and I think it's probably related to the fire, and and that is really with regard to the flag lot and let's say emergency access and emergency exiting. So could we, maybe we could hear a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, we do have the fire marshal here this evening, but I think I do need to clarify that based on my site visit before the packet was published, you cannot make a U-turn at that traffic signal. There's a no U-turn sign posted, unfortunately. So it would be something we would need to study further to see if it can safely be accommodated to remove the no U-turn.
Yeah.
But I do agree with what the applicant said. There is that center kind of island refuge area, I think it would be called, where you could make a left out, wait then for the oncoming traffic, and then safely get into the travel lane.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening. Gareth Harris, Fire Marshal.
Good evening. Fire Marshal, good to have you with us. Maybe you could just comment about your observations about the site and emergency access and emergency exiting.
Well, as you're well aware, it's a unique site in its flag configuration with no access except for the one point. The good thing about it is that it's wide. It's 53 feet wide. And although based on the height and the size of the building, the code would require two ways in and out. Through many meetings and negotiations back and forth and code interpretations, we've approved what we call an AMMR. And so the concept of an AMMR is we look at the base code requirements, and if they can't be met, in this particular case due to the configuration of the lot, then we look at other alternatives that can meet the same intent of having two ways in and out. And so what we've done is we've approved some significant enhanced fire and life safety features to this building and the property in general. And they include additional hydrants all the way around. There'll be 4 fire hydrants on the property that will be private hydrants, so they'll be maintained by the property owner. We've also got aerial apparatus access all along the north aspect of the building, so we'll be able to get our ladder truck up to the roof, up to all levels. We've also got automatic standpipes, and what automatic standpipes are is based on the height of the building, it's required to have water available to us in the stairwells, but we're going to have an automatic system, which means that there's a fire pump that comes on that provides all of the required flow from these standpipes without the fire department having to dedicate additional apparatus into pumping into the system to get the water we need out of it. And it's rather robust. It's 1,000 gallons a minute at the highest elevation, so on the roof, as well as standpipe connections around the exterior of the building, as well as the access lane all the way around the building will allow apparatus to get in and all the way around the building, as well as two ways in and out for people at the building, at least to get back to the single entry. So, you know, at the end of the day, our agreed upon AMMR does meet the intent of having two ways in and out. And so, any other questions about that?
Not from me, thank you. That was really helpful, and it's good to know that both the asset, but also the people have good protection by the added measures.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
I did come up. One more question for the applicant. Maybe my last question.
Please.
For EV car charging, I noticed that it was proposed to have 10% so 40 charging stations. But given the life of the building and the transition to mostly electric cars going forward, 10% doesn't sound like that much. What are your thoughts there?
So, one of the things we usually do is look at what we put in initially and where we can put additional spaces in longer term. Because you have initially how many people are going to use electric spaces, and then if they're not being used, it precludes someone else from parking. Like if you have a gas car, it's hard to park in an electric space. So it can be expanded. The issue is always the power. We have the power for it, and it can be expanded by running conduit. Very easy to do in the garage we have. So as we get a tenant who's really into EV, we will expand it. If initially it looks fine, we'll leave it as is until their driving, cars change, because everybody's moving more and more towards electrical. I will tell you, I personally, now the REACH codes are causing huge percentage of electric vehicles going into office buildings. And while I'm a big proponent of electric vehicles, I'm a big proponent of you charging them at home at night when power is not being used and really cheap, not going to work and charging it right at prime time. But we'll figure that out as we go. But we will accommodate that.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are we good? I am. Okay, thank you for taking the time. All right, so I have one request to speak, Sam Hersberg. So please come on up. And if you could, about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm the only representative from the Greater East San Carlos neighborhood, so I'd appreciate if you could just give me a little bit more time. I've served on the board for over 12 years, former past president. I was involved in the general plan for the east side, rezoning the east side, reviewing a number of large developments around our neighborhood, including PAMP, the Transit Village. I think I attended about 100 meetings of that over 10 years. The Landmark Hotel, been very involved in this area. One thing we're very concerned about is excessive height around our neighborhood, and we worked really hard with the city and Samtrans to try and reduce the height of the Transit Village, which is a quarter mile long on the adjacent to our neighborhood. And this development is quite large, and it's maxing out its development potential with a 2-story garage above ground and a penthouse. And we do think that if it was part of the Innovation District, the East Side Innovation District, shared parking was something that was supposed to be considered. And there's vacant land at PAMP where there could be parking opportunities shared with PAMP. There could also be shared parking opportunities at a future hotel to be developed nearby. We don't think that those options have been exhausted, and we do think that the development itself could come down in height significantly if some compromise was made, which could make it much more palatable to the neighborhood. The landscaping, we would like to see more trees. They're not meeting the requirements now for the required trees. That was something that was discussed in the East Side Innovation District. Unfortunately, in that planning effort, we really didn't focus on this development in this corner. In fact, most of us thought that north of Holly, there wasn't going to be anything in the East Side Innovation District because it never came up, even though this was a development that the city anticipated. We do think that shared parking, trees, being on recycled water are important. Reducing the heat island effects of the area are important. We are concerned about the traffic. I drive through that intersection every day, and there's red light runners constantly. Bike and pedestrian crossing is a real safety hazard. The Cloverleaf, the whole intersection of the freeway, it's 5 years old. It was supposed to happen 5 years ago. It still hasn't happened. There were discussions about a possible roundabout at Industrial and Holly, which could accommodate thorough traffic and bike and pedestrian safety. But I see $4.2 million for GESC improvements, but there hasn't been any dialogue with the community about what those improvements would be. And, there are some ideas about that by the community, and bike pedestrian improvements, bulb outs on streets to improve safety and visibility, street trees on recycled water. But the intersection itself, we're concerned about the queuing up of traffic and that left-hand turn lane getting onto Highway 101. And this is not the only development that's happening here. There's a whole area to the north that's going to be developed. And so this is, one development of many to follow. We really just want this development to fit in a bit more than it does right now. And we do think that the parking and the penthouse are kind of over what is required, and we would like to see some accommodation to try and figure out another way to solve the parking problem so the building height can come down, so it could be much more in context and congruence with the adjacent single-family neighborhood that is the oldest neighborhood in the city. So we were here. We were the original transit village. Everybody started as a train stop, and it is a sensitive land use, so we would appreciate your considerations. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah, sure, please.
I just want to clarify the shared parking concept. Sutter Health uses their parking during the day. My people would use their parking during the day. We can't share. We've offered, and I know the hotel will take us up on it, to use our parking after hours on weekends. If they have a wedding, they don't have enough parking for a big event. We're happy to be a community sharer. We can't give away our parking spaces at the same time we need them. And then number two, the East Side Vision Plan really envisioned greening Industrial Road. We don't have any industrial road frontage. So that's why we've taken our landscaping and said, let's put it at the corner of Industrial Holly where to really make a difference and will help us fit in with the East Side Vision Plan. That land's owned by the city, but we're going to do all the improvements.
Thank you. I don't have, are there other speaker forms here for people present tonight?
None have been passed to me, unless there's somebody in the room that would like to.
Why don't you come on right up?
I'm going to sit down first.
Please introduce yourself.
Sure thing. My name is Bart Pantoja. I'm the Business Manager, Secretary, Treasurer of the San Mateo County Building and Construction Trades Council. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak, and thank you for being here in this evening when many of us, including many of the members that I represent, are, they're getting ready for bed soon. I do represent approximately 16,000 men and women who live and work in San Mateo County, many of them who reside in San Carlos. I've seen the presentation, I've heard a lot of the questions, and it seems like all the negative stuff, the mitigating, it looks like it's covered. And it seems that the Menlo Equities has gone above and beyond in many areas on this project. I'm a glazer, which is architectural glass metal worker is my trade. So whenever I see a lot of beautiful glass, I get excited. It looks like a really nice, aesthetically pleasing building. So we recommend moving this project forward. We recommend, we ask that you would recommend this project. Menlo Equities is committed to building a union constructed building, which is going to be pathways for our apprentices. It's going to bring local people to work on it as it's being built and hopefully provide jobs after the fact. And I'll wrap up with this. One thing we've lost in the United States is manufacturing. Bioscience is one of the few manufacturings that we can say that's American. So this is, as we grow this, the science innovation is blowing up, but if we can continue to have it as a part of our community and people make a living doing it, I think it's a good thing for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments tonight. Lynette, to you, are there any people online that would like to make a comment?
Yes, right now we have 6 people. I will start with Paul, who is number 1. Paul, you are now unmuted.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Paul Maginetti. I'm board member of the GESC Neighborhood Association. For the record, this site is zoned for 50 feet for a reason. We negotiated that in good faith with the city some time ago. And the problem with it being so high is there's going to be so many people there. That intersection right now is already a bottleneck, and as Sam said, it's dangerous already. And if you're going to have hundreds of cars queuing up to make a left-hand turn, it's going to make that much worse. Any improvements to that interchange, that's just not going to happen. It's been 10 years I've been talking about this, and it hasn't happened. If you go forward with this, it's going to be chaos at that bottleneck. You better get some license plate readers to catch all the people who already run the red light. Really, this is not a good fit. And I'll give you back the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Our next caller.
The next caller is phone number ending in 693. You are now unmuted.
Good evening, caller. Could you let us know your name? And you have 2 minutes, please. Lynette is on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, my name is Tim Riley, R-I-L-E-Y. I'm a union sheet metal worker, and I'm in favor of the project. I believe it'll bring a good amount of workers to the area. I've worked in bioscience in South San Francisco, constructing it in a union way. I like that we can bring in some apprentices and teach them how to build on a quality project that is being proposed. I yield back.
Thank you, Tim.
Our next caller is Daniel. Daniel, you're now unmuted.
Good evening, Daniel. Welcome, and 2 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Daniel Rossi. I am also a union sheet metal worker, Local 104. I live actually just down the street from this property, so this is a twofold for me, the interest that goes here. Union-wise, I would love to have a project that, supports unions, because I am actually someone that owns a home here, so that kind of is always something I want to strive for. Another thing, though, I do want to point out as a homeowner in close proximity is, they're proposing to kind of match the height of the building that went down the street. One of the things I noticed when that was done is when they decided on that height, I went from having a private backyard to having probably about 6 or 7 offices that can now look into my backyard, which was not something that I even thought about when I purchased my house. I didn't have to worry about that. My fences were high enough. I had a nice private area here. If we try to propose going from 50 feet to 80 some odd feet, that's nearly double. And while they say that that is not much, I see the airport. It's very close. I see the helicopters flying through. I see all the planes of people flying out of there. That building height does not sound like it's going to be in a safe proximity to that airport, whether they believe so or not. On another note, she was talking about landscaping. When the building's being asked to have about 15% of landscaping, I don't think including Caltrans property or city property as their property really counts as a percentage toward them. Even though they might make that pretty, it's not their property. So I don't really see how they can claim that that's part of the percentage that they're supposed to, beautify with that landscaping that they're committed to. Besides that, like I said, I live here. I bought my home with union wages. I love having union, and this is one of those. I've done HVAC. I've done every type of. I've done the COVID center there at SF General Hospital myself. Raising, the level of type of science we can have there from 1 to 2 kind of concerns me since I have young children. If we go any farther than that, considering 3 and 4, there's no way. It's so close to where I live. I would be, I would actually be one of the people in charge of installing that HVAC system that would cleanse all that air from those science projects they will be doing there. So with that, I would just like to consider, there are people that have families that live here. So that made me kind of concerned when it was kind of like a no thing, that it's a level 1 or 2 that we're allowing there. Besides that, my wife would also like to have a moment, if she could, to speak as well.
Yeah, we also cannot see the timers, just an FYI. My name's Jennifer Rossi, and I just wanted to kind of echo some of the other residents. My concerns are about the height of the building, partially because it doesn't necessarily fit with the character, and also because it's gonna include more people. My concern is actually really about the one way in, one way out. And my concern of what happens if there's something catastrophic that happens there. And I heard the fire marshal saying all these mitigation things, but none of them actually addressed what if you have 300 cars trying to exit the parking lot and you have fire engines trying to get in, but all the spaces are filled with cars all around the building. Their fire lane is basically blocked. And there's no way out. And it doesn't sound like there will actually be a footbridge. That sounds like it might happen, it might not, so you can't really count on that in the design. So I would hate for a catastrophic event to happen in San Carlos because there's not one way in and one way out. It sounds like there really should be, and there was some deal that was made, but my concern is really honestly about the safety of the people around here. So thank you. Good night.
Thank you for your comments. Lynette, our next caller, please.
Our next caller is Debbie, and Debbie, you are unmuted.
Thank you. I am a San Carlos resident. I live near Pulgas Creek, and I'm concerned about the flooding that we've had in that area over where it was Ace Hardware. And when you look at all the concessions they're asking for, it's really sort of shocking that they're asking for 90 feet total when you add the equipment on the top of the roof. And so to have that adjacent to a single family neighborhood, it's just unbelievable. And not only that, as the person, I think Daniel Rossi said, who does HVAC, although there are air scrubbers in those tall exhaust stacks, those aren't really intended to be near a single family neighborhood that close by. So that's very concerning. And so questions I have are on the BSL level, be between 1 and 2, are there any animals on site? Are there any vivariums? And in the event of a fire, what are the redundancies for powering the building? Because when we had all the power outages during the fire on Edgewood, we subsequently learned that VMC, the actual hospital in San Jose, they were without power. Their redundancies failed. So as a prior nurse, I can tell you it would have been unnerving to have to stand in ICU and hand ventilate someone on a respirator. So what are the redundancies for this building? And to the extent that they use PG&E, are there gas lines coming into it, or is the gas that they use in tanks? And if so, when you've got the combination of tanks inside for the various gases and all the wall-powered battery units, how does the fire marshal plan to put out a fire at that site? And if the power goes out, how long would the backup generators power the building? So from a safety point of view, I don't think this is a safe building to have at that site, that particular location. And I would ask the Planning Commission not to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Maybe we can move to our next caller.
Yes, our next caller is David. David, you're now unmuted.
Hello, David.
Unmute. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
And you 2 minutes, please.
Okay. First, I have a question. Was there thinking about sea level rise? And then the second question I have is the number of employees they expect to be there. My quick calculations based on R&D for biotech is about 300 square foot per job, which tells me that they're going to have about 700 employees, give or take. How many housing units does that require to have a housing balance in the city? And I see it to be that two jobs per one house. That's 350 units of housing. And where are we going to do that? I know it's part of that. We're going to talk about the housing element later, but this is just one example of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of the scope of the housing issue. And the other thing is that you've got a little over $4 million in for housing impact fees for affordable housing. You know, at $500,000 per unit, you get only 8 units of affordable housing and all of that. Or if you can use that as a seed money or something, you might get, maybe 20, 30. The jobs housing balance, this is just one more example of just blowing the jobs housing balance in San Carlos just out the window. And so I'm not specifically against this project, but I do really concerned about how the housing element is going to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lynette, do we have one more caller, a couple more callers?
Yeah, so now 2 more callers. Tim will be next. Tim, you are now unmuted.
Hello, my name is Tim Hilborn.
Hello, Tim. Welcome, and you have 2 minutes, please.
I live in Greater East San Carlos, and I have also served on the board as well. I'm just going to come right out and say it that you deny this project. This is way too close for a biotech company to be to a neighborhood. Just echoing what some of the other callers have said. In the event there's an emergency or an accident, our neighborhood is way too close. And also, if you decide to go forward with it, this project does exceed the maximum height of 50 feet, and the applicant is proposing something twice as high as that. This is just completely out of character with our neighborhood and with the surrounding community as a whole. So I'm asking that you take at least 1 or 2 of those parking spaces and either go over to PAMF and build the parking spaces over there, do something else, get creative with it. But we don't need 4 parking spaces and then a nice penthouse for people to look out over our neighborhood. That's completely inappropriate. So please lower the height to the 50-foot allowed. We have asked for a buffer through the East Side plan over and over and over again. And 100 feet, 90 feet is not a buffer for that. I'm asking also that we do not allow traffic to make a left turn out of there with in and out right there. It's crazy. And I have personally seen accidents happen with people running red lights there. It is very, very dangerous. So we do not want that. Lastly, the landscaping needs to have the full requirement, not 15%. They're trying to skirt this with saying that they're going to put landscaping out in the community. Well, they need to do the full amount there and also put it out in the community as well. But the main thing is this biotech is way too close to a neighborhood. It is not safe. And if you decide to go forward, do not allow it to go past biohazard safety level 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
B, so now we have 2 more. B is the next caller. And B, you're now unmuted.
Hello, B. Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. 2 minutes, please.
Sure, yeah. I would like to echo some of the sentiments, presented earlier by the GESC neighbors. I sort of want to speak on behalf of Holly Street. This is a residential part of Holly Street, which I saw wasn't covered in any of, Holly Street is mentioned, but it's mostly the one that goes towards 101 and not the residential part. I know the residential street is a bit tricky, which is going into San Carlos downtown, where, you have traffic that's after 6 o'clock, you sort of have one street. And then, so I'm just wondering whether this project has thought about how to improve both traffic safety as well as pedestrian safety there, because there's definitely going to be people going this side as well, not just, going towards 101 for whatever reasons they might want to go to downtown. So I just wanted to know about how Holly Street fits into the whole picture, the residential part. And the second thing that I wanted to bring up was, I was there in the previous city council meeting as well, and it looks like there are many different projects going on. Like, the south of Holly, they are trying to improve their roads. And then north of Holly has been voicing their concern, like today. Holly, like I said, has its own issues. And we have these East Side Innovation Plan, the Northeast Side Innovation Plan. So what I'm seeing is there are these different pieces, and each one, like each different project, you have this debate, but there is no holistic approach to sort of distributing the safety features across and protecting the residents. So I would like to know how the planning commission is thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next caller is Patty. Patty, you are now unmuted.
Hi.
Hello, Patty.
Hi, I live south of Holly in the GESC neighborhood, and I would like to agree with most of my my neighbors' point of views that have brought up the whole. There's some scary stuff that they brought up, but what I would like to say is, in the presentation, you were told that this new building, 405, is going to be from industrial. It's going to look the same height as PAMP, and it's going to be a little bit lower than Alexandria. And what you are forgetting is that the precedent for allowing Alexandria was that it was removed from the residential neighborhood. There's a step back. There's a buffer zone. And if you look at how close this building is to the neighborhood, it's much closer than Alexandria is to homes, and it's much closer to homes than PAMP is. So please remember that, that whole idea of a buffer zone has been put into place. And the whole, architects are kind of interesting people. You get a plan development and you can just double. That's, and then they're told, the neighborhood says you're too close. So they say, oh, we'll step back. We'll put a terrace where people can spend time outdoors. And so they take it back. And also, one thing they said was that people are going to be walking from or biking from the train, and there's really no safe way to get to that property from the train. You are taking your life in your hands if you are biking or walking. When my kids were little in grade school, I didn't let them walk on Industrial because the sidewalk was right next to the cars. And crossing Holly, I'm sorry for the man who lives on Holly, but you have problems. You as a planning commission, we as a city have problems. And if this developer wants to be a participant in our city, then maybe they need to listen to the residents, bring the level down, maybe put some, solar things up there to power their water pumps during the event of a failure. So thank you. Probably 2 minutes there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Patty. Lynette, are there other callers?
There are no more callers at this time.
Very good. Well, I think we've heard from the public present here and our applicant and from callers. I would entertain a motion to close public comment.
I will move that we close the public hearing.
And I second that.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Castaneda,
Yes.
and Chair Iacoponi.
Yes. Okay, so we've had a lot of input tonight, a lot of material to look at. This is our deliberation period. So to my fellow commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I can kick things off. I'd like to.
Commissioner Garvey, please.
Thank you, Chair Iacoponi. Just to talk about the height of the building, so many people have raised this issue. It is tall. I think the design of the building helps. I think that setback on the upper floor that is landscaped helps to soften the look and helps to set it back more. The other thing that I like is that the height is aligned with its neighbor, Sutter Health. They are very similar in height. And this building is more set back. It's behind In-N-Out Burger. And so for me, the height issues, I think, have been resolved in a meaningful way. And I have other comments, but I think I'll just start with the height.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Roof.
As far as the height goes, I agree. It is similar to the Sutter Health buildings, although those buildings are a little bit further away from the residences. The picture showing the building from the neighborhood, to me, conveyed a pretty modest impact. And I'm trying to weigh that against the reality of a residential neighborhood being next to an industrial area. You can't expect zero impact. And so trying to weigh the impact on the neighborhood versus the plan to have a landmark building in that location and the constraints of the site needing to kind of be up and above the In-N-Out Burger makes me think that it's an acceptable situation as far as the proposed height goes. I think the applicant made pretty good efforts to mitigate the height where possible, and to me it landed in an acceptable zone.
Thank you, Commissioner Roof. Commissioner Castaneda.
I also think that the mitigating circumstances on the height make it more acceptable. And looking at the pictures, I tend to agree with what my fellow commissioners have said, that the height is probably okay. I would like clarification on the biohazard issue. At this point, is there?
I just for the record, I know you're new, but please try to speak in the microphone because I'm not sure that your comments are being picked up for the record. So I just, just slide it closer to you then.
All right, I'll do that. Yeah, so I'll just repeat that I agree with what my fellow commissioners said on the height issue. I think that the setbacks are quite helpful, and I think the building is far enough behind In-N-Out Burger. But I would like clarification on the biohazard issue that people have brought up. I had thought, so I'd like clarification, that we were talking about biohazard 1 and 2 at this point only, and I'd like to have that clarified.
So the plan development permit contains a requirement that it be limited to biohazard safety level 1 and 2 only, and that anything else would be considered prohibited.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. You know, maybe if I could, and get some help from staff, I think we have quite a number of entitlements, as Lisa Costa-Sanders pointed out. And could you just remind us of the different findings we need to make, and or the different motions we have? Maybe they were just put on up so that we can sort of organize our thoughts.
Certainly. So the first one we'd like you to consider is the CEQA, the Mitigated Negative Declaration. And so you need to make a recommendation to the City Council on that. They would be the final decision maker. And the key is there enough information in that document that you have to base your decision on? So do you feel it was adequate? It covers all the subject matter points that are contained in CEQA, and does it contain enough information for you to make a decision? So that's for the CEQA document. It's the Mitigated Negative Declaration, and then also would be approving the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Plan. And then the second would be if you're comfortable making a recommendation for the ordinance approving the plan development plan and the zoning map designating the site plan development, as well as recommending the development agreement. So that's a separate resolution. And those findings are really based on, does this a design superior to that would be approved with the base zoning? Does it provide some community benefits that would be recognized? And does it further the goals of the general plan? And then finally, you would be the decision maker on the design review, transportation demand management plan, grading and dirt haul. And then those subject to all the conditions listed in the code compliance certificate that's attached. And there's numerous findings relating to those, but similarly consistent with the zoning, consistent with the general plan, and compatible. So I think the findings are all included as attachment 1 to the staff report.
Thank you. Okay. So maybe if we could, I'd like to suggest we take these in turn. And I think we have the response to CEQA. There were a number of items that were presented early in the deck that we had to find that for example, if I recall, bird hazard and the glazing materials used, or lighting impact and the automatic shades as examples, were included in a way that created the space for us to support a mitigated negative declaration. So, Lisa, can we take the motions one at a time?
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you. So with this first motion, are there other questions or comments that you'd like to make?
I can go first and say that I thought the mitigated negative declaration was well supported with the studies that were provided. I especially did appreciate the shades going shades going down. I'd sort of like to see that more universally implemented in that. Bright lights, interior lights, you can see from the surrounding parts of San Carlos, the hills as well, and it looked like a comprehensive and convincing package for that. So I would support the first motion there.
Thank you, Commissioner Garvey.
I will echo that. Thank you, Chair Iacopone. I too liked the light mitigation, the thought given to the glass type, and the auto shades that would be happening when needed. In looking at the CEQA document, I saw that the emissions from construction of the project were going to be fully mitigated, and given where this project is located, that was very important to me, and I believe that was handled very well in the document, and I too think they did a good job.
Commissioner Castaneda.
I agree. I think the mitigation declaration was good. I like what they're doing with the lighting and with the bird strike. And it seemed as if the plan covered all of the materials that needed to be covered. I agree with it.
Thank you. And my, I would echo your comments, all of your comments. I think the response to the CEQA and the actions that are embedded in the design, for me, adequately address this. So I would support it. So for my part, I'd welcome a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission make the findings and adopt the resolution recommending the City Council certify the mitigated negative declaration and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan.
I will second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Castaneda?
Yes.
And Chair Iacoponi?
Yes. Thank you. So then we have the next element, which, and again, thank you for clarifying. This one, I think, then incorporates the comments that you all had earlier about the design and, you know, kind of this balance between community development and the benefits to the community, because it is a proposed planned development with both $4.2 million being available, respecting that conversations haven't been had yet as to how to deploy that, but I would expect that staff and greater East Side community team would be involved in that discussion. And that being brought forward with some softening of the building profile, particularly as it is viewed from the neighborhood. And I particularly appreciate the idea of the planting of trees that are proposed north on Industrial to begin to build out this East Side vision of a tree-lined street and also on the corner. It doesn't feel like it's perfect, but I think it's our judgment that we have to take the input and make a recommendation, and I'm hearing support. And I would support this motion as well. And so I will move that the Planning Commission make the findings and adopt the resolution recommending the City Council adopt the ordinance approving the plan development plan and adopting the zoning map designating the site plan development and approve the development agreement.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof?
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey?
Yes.
Commissioner Castaneda?
Yes.
And Chair Iacoponi?
Yes. Thank you all. So then I think the third item has the elements of design review, transportation demand management plan, and we've not had extensive discussion on that, and then grading and dirt haul certificate. So maybe before we progress, are there comments on any of those elements? Commissioner Garvey?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the transportation demand management plan, we didn't talk about it, and I just wanted to put on the record, this project is within walking distance of the Caltrain station. One of the priorities of the city is to have development that is within easy walking distance to the Caltrain station, and this development is, I think, a 5-minute walk. So that is really a priority for me, and this project meets that. The EV charging stations, I will echo Commissioner Roof's comment, 40 stalls is a lot of EVs, and we might need more, and I appreciated the comment from the applicant that if we need more, they have the power, they can do more slots if we need it. One of the things that was in the packet that we didn't talk about tonight with the bicycle parking, it seems to me the bicycle parking in the packet said it was caged in, and if they need to, they can expand it. So if people choose to bike from Caltrain and the site where they currently park the bicycles, which I think they said was a chained area in the parking garage, they could expand it. So I liked that. I thought it's a flexible design, and if they need it, we can use it. So I felt that the transportation demand management plan was very well done, and I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Castaneda.
I agree on the transportation demand management plan. I thought it was well done, and I think it is close to the existing transports.
Thank you. Commissioner Roof, anything to add?
The transportation management plan also seemed thorough to me, and it was conducted using standard methodology, and they say the impact would be acceptable. Of course, that doesn't mean there's no impact, but there would be impact for any development on that site. And the nature of that, of a biotech building, is that everybody doesn't jump out of the building exactly at 5 o'clock. It would be a more dispersed arrival and departure times. And so to me, it seems to make sense intuitively as well. As far as the landscape goes, aesthetically, whether it's on Caltrans land or their land, either way, they're making it look a little better. And the safety concerns that prompted having the paved area all around the building make a special circumstance that kind of let me accept the 8% instead of 15% just because of the peculiarities of that lot and situation. I wouldn't, in other circumstances, I might not be so quick to agree with that, but for this lot, it seems to make sense what's being proposed. So for that and other reasons, I would support the third motion here as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Garvey, please.
Thank you. One additional question, turning to the design. One of the things I liked about the design, and I don't think we talked about it this evening, is the articulation of the building as you go around the bend. They really thought about what is it going to look like when you're coming off that exit ramp. And this is not only an underdeveloped piece of land, this is a gateway property. And I thought the design of that curve was really well thought out with the building in coming into San Carlos with not just a flat face, but I thought that stepped back articulation was nicely designed. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, for my part, the TMD, yes, agreed, done well. And I guess what is different about this one is the expectation that there is a full-time coordinator paid for, as I read it. Maybe if it's not true, somebody could correct me, but full-time coordinator whose job it is to monitor this with annual or maybe multiple times per year survey of actual implementation habits, behaviors, so that we know whether or not it's working, and are able to take follow-up steps as a result. And the applicant is accountable for making this work. And the city has recourse, as I understand it, if the TMD is not working. So I feel good about that. I think, maybe an aside, moving 120 trucks a day of dirt for 34 days seems like a lot of activity. It's probably more like 8 weeks by the time you really get it done. But and while we didn't talk about it, maybe it's just a question. Will all the truck traffic be in and out of the site and onto the highway and not through the city? Is that correct? I'm getting a nod from our applicant, so I feel okay about that, and then agree on the points of design. So I can support this. And with that, if anyone would like to make a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the design review certificate, transportation demand management plan, and grading and dirt haul certificate subject to the conditions listed in the certificate for the development of a new 292,615 square feet building at 405 Industrial Road, APNs 046 051 080, for the reasons incorporated in the staff report and with the conditions in the code compliance certificate.
I second that.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Roof,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvey,
Yes.
Commissioner Castaneda,
Yes.
and Chair Iacoponi.
Yes. Well, to the applicant, thank you for the presentation, and to staff for the hard work tonight on this project. We always appreciate the comments from the public. We understand that this will have some impact, and again, I think we've strived to find balance, and good luck with City Council.
And I'd like to add that I studied the written submitted comments from the public and took that into account as well.
Thank you for that. I would echo that, yes.
And I agree, I did too.
Very good. So we have our next agenda item, which is to receive the preliminary draft 2015 to 2023 housing element and provide staff with comments to consider prior to sending the document to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for review. And maybe, Lisa, before we start, can I just check to see if maybe we should take a very quick break? Can we do that?
That's fine. Should that be the pleasure of the commission? Certainly.
Can we take a 5-minute break, please?
Okay, we'll return at 8:57.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for the break, everyone. We're back in session. Again, I'll reiterate, this is a study session to receive the preliminary draft of the 2023 to 2031 housing element and provide staff with comments to consider prior to sending the document to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for their review.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. My name is Lisa Porras, Planning Manager and Project Manager for the item before you this evening, and I will be making the presentation. So again, this is a study session on the draft housing element. There's no formal recommendation being requested of the Commission this evening. The recommendation is to receive the draft and then provide staff with any comments you may have for us to consider prior to sending the document to the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, for its review. So just a review of the draft, and the anticipated adoption of the housing element is we're looking at the month of January 2023. So just before we kind of dive in, I wanted to pause for a moment to reiterate the purpose of the project. For one, it is a City Council strategic objective to actively encourage and support the creation of housing to provide a safe, inclusive, diverse, and affordable housing supply by facilitating development of housing for all income levels. This is a City Council strategic goal that it's made several years and continuing to be a goal within their strategic objectives. But in addition to that, it is time to update our housing element to comply with state law. The housing element is required to be updated every 8 years. Our current housing element will expire in the year 2023, and our obligation at the time was 596 new housing units. In this cycle, the 2023 to 2031 period, we have a much higher RHNA, but not just San Carlos. This is all cities and counties throughout the state of California, given the need for housing across the entire state. And our future cycles, just to reiterate, that this is a cyclical process, would be the year 2031 to 2039, and then after that, 2039 to 2047. So this is something that has been required by the state for over 50 years now. So tonight's agenda, I wanted to go over, for the benefit of the Commission and for those who may be watching at home, or anyone who might walk into City Council chambers this evening, we want to talk about the process. What has the process been like? Where have we been, and where do we need to go? I'd like to also summarize the community outreach and civic engagement component of the project, and then touch upon what the primary task of the housing element is, and what our strategy is or consists of, what we're proposing in order to meet our housing needs. I will also touch on some of the action items that are found within Section 2 of the draft housing element. While there's quite a few, I'm only going to focus on some of the ones that I think that have garnered some attention over the past year and through community input and discussion on other items related to housing. I will also talk about the next steps, what's involved as the draft housing element gets submitted to the state for its review, and then reiterate our adoption schedule. And we're obligated to adopt a project by the end of January 2023, or at least to get a certified housing element. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as we proceed. So just to touch upon the process, this has been a multi-year effort, and it really kind of began back in 2019. You all may remember the Welcome Home San Carlos event that we had across Highway 101, inviting a lot of members from the community to talk about housing in the city. And this was really kind of like a foundational stepping point to kind of move into the update of the housing element, which we started at the end of the year 2020, working with our consultant teams, and sending out information to the community and having our first workshop in November. It was also the time when our consultants began a thorough review of our existing housing conditions in the city, looking at our plans and development standards to kind of understand, how housing can occur within San Carlos, given our current regulations. Moving into the year 2021, we continued with community workshops where we talked about different land use strategies, what changes could be made to housing and some potential solutions. We had a city council study session right around the same time as the East Side Innovation District Vision Plan was being adopted, and we had several focus group meetings with the community. For this year, we started to draft the housing element. And in conjunction with that, I just wanted to touch on and also remind the Commission that several other elements of the general plan need to be amended concurrent with the housing element. So pursuant to state law, whenever a city or county updates its housing element, we have to also update our safety element. So that is being done to comply with some new requirements. We're going to talk about that in another study session, what some of those other changes would be. But they are sort of triggered by updating the housing element. We had what we need to do, and we are doing it now, is reviewing these documents with the community, these updates to these different elements of the city's general plan. We also initiated the environmental review process of this project by having a scoping meeting back in January, earlier this year. And then we will be releasing the draft EIR in the next several months. Our consultants are also on the line. They can clarify the schedule for that as well. And then beginning early next year, we are going to be bringing the housing element along with the environmental safety element, the land use element, and accompanying zoning amendments to the Planning Commission for a recommendation and then to the City Council for adoption. And I have those dates. And the state has mandated that we complete this all by the end of January 2023. So we are just sort of right on track and right where we need to be and should be at this point with the overall process. In regards to community outreach, we had a very robust and a very really good process for reaching out to the community that really sort of stemmed from the Welcome Home process and the outreach that we did. We issued a City of Good Living Spotlight newsletter in the month of November. And the Commission may know and recall that this newsletter goes out to every resident and every business in the city. And this was a great opportunity to talk about the Housing Element Project to the community. We launched a project website, sancarlos2040.org, and we advertised our first community workshop in November, all within that same Spotlight newsletter. We had information for the people to sign up to continue to receive information about the project, and I think today we have about 1,000 different emails that we've gathered over time that we send information out, including notification of this study session we're having tonight. We had several workshops that are summarized in the housing element itself, and then we also touch upon that in the staff report. It's noted here on this slide. We had focus group meetings with key groups, including those that represent special needs housing, which is a state mandate. That is something that we're required to do. And we've had several study sessions already, including meetings with the 2-member City Council Housing Subcommittee. So there's been kind of a lot of touch points along the way. And overall, we had about 370 people who participated directly, whether by attending workshops or completing surveys. And of course, we continue to get letters from the public, which I know a lot have come through today and even within the last couple hours or so. So this is just a quick summary of the efforts we've made. Also, we've used all channels of our social media outreach links and so forth. So I would say that there's been quite a bit of community outreach to inform the community of this objective and how we might solve it. So the primary task of the housing element update is to ensure that San Carlos has housing policies and development standards to facilitate its fair share of the Bay Area's regional housing needs as required by state law. So that's really the objective of the housing element, is how to accommodate this housing growth, to take a look at our policies and to take a look at our development standards and make sure they're not impeding the production of housing. So the commission has received a copy of the housing element. I see it all here on the dais. We have copies available at the library, at the Adult Community Center, and here at City Hall. It's available on the project website, and we've let folks know that it is available to review. And it's quite a large document. A lot of what you'll find in the housing element is response to state requirements in terms of a lot of socio-demographic information about the housing stock, its characteristics, its age, ownership, tenure. There's quite a lot in there. And this is not to persuade anyone to not look at those areas, but from staff's perspective, what we would say is that two key areas are really important to look at, and we don't want to be remiss in not pointing these out to the community. The first has to do with the goals, policies, and actions. Why? Because these are the action items that the city would commit to if we adopt the housing element as it's presented over the next 8-year planning period. So these are our sort of guiding policies and programs that we would commit to doing. So those are important to take a look at and make sure that, yes, this is something we're going to commit to. And then secondly are the accompanying zoning ordinance amendments. I would say that during the last housing element cycle, this was not an important part of the work to get the housing element updated and adopted and certified by the state. Why? Because we had the right zoning in place to accommodate the need at the time. But given the larger need for housing, the greater importance on housing, and the fact that we need to build more housing, we know that we have to adjust our zoning in order to make that happen. So Action HOU 4.2, which is found on page 23, and the housing element speaks to those adjustments that need to be made. And we're going to walk through that this evening, but it's important for the community to understand those as well. So our strategy to meet the RHNA is going to be discussed over the next couple of slides, but just to kind of kick us off, the Commission will recall that our RHNA obligation consists of a total of 2,735 units. That was the number that was given to San Carlos, and that is broken down by different income groups, beginning with very low, to low, moderate, and then above moderate or market rate housing. Because we know that not every site that we identify for housing, this is also part of the housing element process, is to identify which sites are most feasible and good candidates to accommodate the housing need. Because not every site is guaranteed to turn over or to be developed with the number of units in mind, it's a common practice with most jurisdictions to have backup units, or what we refer to as the buffer units. So for San Carlos, what staff and the consultants proposed to the community, and this was presented at community workshops, is to take 30% of our affordable housing need, which is 1,602 units. So 1,602 units is a total of 739 very low, 425 low, and 438 mod, to give us an additional 481 units, which would amount to 3,216 units to plan for this particular housing element cycle. And just a reminder, it's kind of a common comment that is made is like, well, it's the city's job then to produce the housing, and that's not necessarily true. What we need to do is make sure that we set the table for it, that we don't have policies or standards that are unnecessarily constraining the production of units. So it's really through our policies and standards that we're able to to have a certified housing element by the state. And then every year, through our annual progress reporting process that we're required to do by the state, we report on the number of units that we're making progress towards over the 8-year cycle. So how will San Carlos meet its RHNA? So this table here, it kind of breaks that down into how well we can accomplish that. And how we will accomplish that. So beginning at the top of the table, we start with our RHNA number. We add in the additional buffer units. We get to our 3,216 number. We get to count all of the projects that are pending and even those that have been approved but not yet issued the building permit. These are referred to as those projects in the pipeline. Right now on the books, we have a total of 352 units in the pipeline that we can subtract from that 3216 number. In addition to that, we did some analysis with our consulting team. We developed the number of projected accessory dwelling units that we would expect to see over the next 8 years. Those are 203. We also projected a certain amount of SB 9 units, or maybe what's a common way to refer to SB 9, Senate Bill 9 is the new law that was passed and just went into effect this year that allows duplexes on single-family lots. So we projected a total of about 160 of those over the next 8-year period. And then for multifamily and mixed use, this is where we'll see the majority of the units being accounted for. 425 in the multifamily zoning districts and 2,455 in our mixed use zoning districts. But there is an asterisk next to those to indicate that we would need to make changes to those zoning districts in order to achieve the numbers presented here on the screen. All of those together amount to 3,595 units, which is more than our baseline RHNA and then more than our 3216. Again, it's up to the State Department of Housing and Community Development to approve the housing sites that we identify, but this is the direction we're headed. So I just wanted to pause for a moment to sort of, before I get into the zoning changes, to explain how we arrived at our zoning changes. The commission may recall, and those watching at home may recall, we had community workshops to talk about density and what that massing could look like. In one of the workshops, this is the slide that we presented. On the very right, in the diagram or in the rendering, it shows what could be built under our existing code. Our existing code along El Camino Real allows 4 stories and a maximum of 50 feet in height. There are some provisions in the zoning code that allow you to exceed 50 feet for certain types of equipment or stairwells, elevator shafts, etc. But overall, the maximum height is 50 feet. And then we looked at 2 different scenarios, and we referred to them as scenario A and B. What would that look like if we bump that up to 6 stories at a maximum of 75 feet and at 8 stories at a maximum of 90 feet? When we presented this to the community, those that were in attendance understood that we needed to make changes, and they felt relatively comfortable with the 6-story and 75-foot scenario, or scenario A. That would make up our highest density. So kind of to break this down a little bit, this is just sort of how we backed into the units per the acre. When we did the analysis for the massing that we just saw on the previous slide, we did some case studies that looked at the number of floors, how many units would fit into that massing based upon, a unit mix of 10% studios, 55% one bedrooms, and so forth, and looked at our parking requirements altogether and determined, what would that units per acre, how would that back into the units per acre development standard. So in the middle here, you see scenario A, and to the left, we're looking at it with our current parking requirements. And then we also looked at it with a parking reduction, like if we were to reduce our parking, how many more units could we get? And what did the community think about that? The community wasn't keen on reducing our parking standards, so we sort of went with the current parking requirements. And you can see there at the bottom that particular case study yielded needed about 122 units to the acre. So that's how we got to 120 units to the acre for areas along El Camino Real. So again, this is just explaining to the commission and those at home how we came up with these figures. And just as an example, I'm going to get to this in just a moment, but the proposed changes to our zoning ordinance would be at the highest density, 120 units to the acre, but we are also proposing 100 units to the acre in other areas in the multifamily and mixed-use zoning districts, which I will show on a map in just a moment. But in terms of a local example that we can look at is the recently constructed project at 817 Walnut, where the true density on the site is 100 units to the acre. Of course, they got a state density bonus because this wasn't, the base density on the site, but it is about a 10,500 square foot lot that was able to yield this many units on such a small lot. So this is the best example I could come up with to show what density looks like, what 100 units to the acre actually looks like. In addition to that, we also did some studies back several years ago with another consulting firm to look at our MUN zoning district. Our MUN zoning district allows 4 stories, but it was limited by the number of units per acre that you can get on a particular site. So we did an analysis of this. So here's an example of a site, along Laurel, which is built according to the maximum provisions under the MUN zoning district, which is MUN 20 units to the acre. So under 20 units to the acre on a site like this, the maximum number of units that you could get would be 2 units, but the number of stories you can get would be 4. So what we discovered in this analysis is that the massing was kind of too big, if you will, for the number of units that you can get on the site. Those units would end up being very large units, and it's really not an efficient use of the site. When we kind of peeled this apart a little bit more closely, we looked at a scenario. We looked at a scenario that basically increased the units to the acre to 50. So what would it do? Could we even accomplish 50 units to the acre? And we found that we could do that, but we could do it in a 3-story massing rather than a 4-story massing. So really what we discovered here is that the development standard of units per acre in the MUN zoning district was artificially keeping the unit yield lower than would be desired. When we presented this to the community, so we looked at the highest level, the 100 and 120, and we also looked at MUN 20, which was kind of the lowest density, to see what we could. What might be able to be changed with some community support for it. And where we ended up was not necessarily with a 50 units per acre, which is shown on the far right. We ended up with 40 units per acre, with the community feeling that that's something that they could support. So I'll show that in just a moment. Again, in this particular scenario C here, none of the parking needed to be changed at all in order to accommodate, at least doubling the number of units that you can get under this particular scenario. So before I get into the zoning changes, I just wanted to pause and show you our existing multifamily and mixed-use zoning districts and how they primarily lay out geographically in our city. Let me see if I can use the mouse here. Yeah, I think it's working. So you can see here, this is El Camino Real going along here. And then just off of that is San Carlos Avenue. Our maximum density along El Camino Real is 50 units to the acre, and along East San Carlos Avenue in this area, shaded in pink, is 59 units to the acre. The dark purple is 50 units to the acre at 4 stories with a conditional use permit to get that 4-story. But this is our downtown core, and around that, and the lighter purple, we have mixed use downtown. And then, of course, across the train tracks, we have some MUN, or mixed-use neighborhood, 20 units to the acre in pink, and that also is repeated in some places along El Camino Real, and then along the western side of Laurel Street, as you can see here in this diagram. So primarily all of our mixed use is along El Camino Real. There's some on East San Carlos Avenue, some on Old County Road, and then along San Carlos Avenue. And then surrounding the mixed use is our multifamily zoning district, the RM 59 zoning district, which is shown here in gold. So what we are proposing to do is to essentially upzone all of these existing zoning districts. So we took all of our mixed-use zoning districts, and based upon where they were geographically, we increased the zoning, the amount of units per acre. And it's really easy to kind of understand what the density factor is following the name of the district. So the first in this legend here, MUD, which is mixed use downtown, is now set at 100 units per acre, as opposed to the 50 units per acre it is currently zone 4. And then we have another designation called mixed use downtown 120. So all of the zoning densities follow the naming of the zoning district. You can see that the majority of the districts in the downtown are our mixed-use districts. They all start with MU. And then we do have some existing RM 59 remaining, but then also have a new density increase for some RM in certain areas to go up to 100. And you can see all of that here in kind of like this bluish color here. How this looks and how it's represented in the housing element document, it really walks you through what the existing zoning designations are and then what the proposed zoning designations would be, again, in order to meet our RHNA. It also walks us through the existing density, the units per acre, and then shows the corresponding proposed units per acre. So as an example, the MUN is going from 20 units to the acre to 40 units to the acre. What is also new that staff and the consultants are proposing for this housing element is to introduce a new minimum density requirement. So all of the minimum densities required and corresponding to each zoning district are listed right here. So for example, again, using the MUN 40 example, if someone were to scrape a building or demolish a building and develop something that is brand new, the minimum density requirement would be at least 30 units to the acre. One of the reasons that staff is proposing the minimum density units to the acre is to ensure that we really do and try to use our land most efficiently in order to get the number of units that's being asked of us, our own obligation for those units to be built in our city. And in addition to that, there have been instances in the past where some projects did not hit our below market rate thresholds that we have in place. So for example, it's been recently modified, but as an example, once you hit 7 units, there would be an obligation on the developer's part to include some of the units as affordable. So in some cases, we've seen some projects come in just under that. So we didn't want to see that anymore. We really wanted to make sure that we really sort of address that. And so that is another reason why we're introducing these minimum density requirements. To the far right, you can see the existing height limits currently in place, shown in this column here, and then the corresponding proposed height limits that would correspond to the increases in density. So as an example, our highest density would be 120 units to the acre, and then the proposed building height that corresponds with 120 units to the acre is 75 feet. And then a corresponding increase in the number of stories would go from four stories to 6 stories. So in general, San Carlos is a 50 units per acre city with a maximum of 4 stories and 50-foot height limits. So that is all increasing across each zoning district, as you can see here on the screen. So out of that, out of those zoning changes, the other thing that we needed to do is to identify what our housing sites are. All of the housing sites that have been identified are included in Appendix A of the housing element document. They are listed there by their assessor parcel number, by the address, and also it identifies the approximate number of units associated with each site. This map here is showing all of the sites that have been identified as part of the sites feasible. Like, so if we were to actually meet the 3,500 unit that I talked about earlier in the previous slide, this is where they would go within the city. However, any site that wants to develop that we haven't identified is also, of course, in play to assist us in meeting our RHNA. The next item I wanted to talk about are some housing element policies, or specifically some action items to call the Commission's attention to. Some of the things that we've been hearing a lot about in the community is that we really ought to encourage the concurrent production of either housing on-site or off-site in lieu of a commercial housing linkage fee payment. As the Commission is aware, non-residential development has a commercial housing linkage fee that they're required to pay, and I think that was even one of the fees that you probably saw in the previous item on tonight's agenda. So we are formally recognizing that it is the desire of the city to find a way to encourage concurrent production. This could mean, working at the forefront or initially with developers who are wanting to do projects in the city, giving them a list of sites that we have on the books and, keeping those sites current, and really encouraging, some creative ways to think about if there's any possibilities or potential to actually do a concurrent project with the non-residential development. So we're memorializing that in our housing element in this particular draft. It's not there now. The other action item is to really look at getting pre-approved plans for accessory dwelling units and to help encourage their expedited review. This is one of the City Council strategic objectives to spur accessory dwelling units, so we are memorializing that in the housing element. The other action item, this is really pursuant to a state law, but it's important to point out, is that if a particular housing development somehow is approved with a reduced number of units, so say a developer came in and they wanted to reach the 120 units to the acre, but during the entitlement process, through public comment or through some other design objectives a commission or other decision-making body may impose on them, the density is decreased, then it's our obligation as a city to make up those units elsewhere. So that is often referred to as the no net loss. So that's an action item that we need to abide by, and if we don't, if a developer comes in and proposes a higher number of units, not a higher number of units to the acre, but let's say the maximum density, and they don't get it, then we have to make up those sites elsewhere. The other action in the housing element to point your attention to has to do with reevaluating the city density bonus. The Commission may recall the city density bonus amendments were recently presented, and the Commission made a recommendation on those to the City Council, and they were approved by the City Council. So the city density bonus allows rental projects to add bonus market rate units at a ratio of 4:1 for every low-income unit and at a ratio of 2:1 for each low-income unit. So this is really to help spur rental projects in our city. And the way that it is currently applies is that it applies citywide. So any rental project would be able to utilize the city density bonus provisions as they're currently adopted today. During discussion, I think this came up with the Planning Commission and also at City Council, there was some discussion about maybe perhaps narrowing this density provision to certain areas in the city rather than just uniformly applied citywide in the multifamily and mixed-use zoning districts. So this is where this particular action item comes from. It's just direct staff to kind of take a look at that and see if that's something that we ought to do and should do, so that we would commit to that in this particular housing element. Action 4.2 has to do with all of the zoning ordinance revisions. So this is an action item that the state would be looking at, and an action item that we are largely relying on in order to meet our RHNA. And again, it calls for increasing the density, the heights, and the number of stories, and also inserting that new minimum density requirement. So action 4.4 has to do with objective design standards and streamlining development regulations. So this is a project that is currently underway, and some community workshops will be held, I think, later this fall or early next year on mixed use and multifamily housing. So this is kind of like fine-tuning the look and feel of the building. It will not dive into anything to be inconsistent with the changes that we would be proposing to the zoning ordinance as part of the housing element project, but it would really go through with a fine-tooth comb and just kind of refine some of the standards related to design, materials, windows, fenestrations, all the other elements related to projects. So we want to take credit for that here and make sure that we are adhering to the state law that requires us to develop clear and objective standards in our development regulations. And then last, there's been a lot of conversation and strategies dealing with childcare development. The City Council is slated to adopt a childcare development impact fee on their next agenda. I think it's on September 26th. So we want to get credit for that. So we are memorializing that in the housing element. And we also have some action items related to by right child care centers. So that would involve taking a look at our zoning districts and determining which ones should be amended to allow child care centers by right. So the next steps in the overall process do include another study session with the City Council a week from today on September 26th. We are right now currently in a 30-day public comment review period for the housing element. This is a requirement by the state that we allow the public 30 days to comment on the housing element. That period began on August 30th when the housing element was released, and it will close on September the 30th. And then thereafter, staff and the consultant team will be making revisions to the draft housing element based upon community input, recommendations by the Planning Commission, and direction by the City Council. I would say that these are revisions that we could consider. There may be some comments or recommendations that could come forward that could be in conflict with state law. And when we hear those, should we hear those tonight? Or we'll make sure that we point out what's not possible to change, because there are certain things that we have to do pursuant to state law, which is why we refer to these as potential revisions. If there's anything that we missed or things that we can clarify and add, we certainly want to do that and tighten up our draft housing element before we submit it to the state. We expect that sometime in mid-October we would be submitting our document to the state, and they have 90 days to provide us with a response letter. If they take the full 90 days, we should be getting it on or before January 17th. And I also want to clarify that it is quite normal to get a response letter or two, and maybe in this cycle 3 from the state. They're not a rejection. I think in some communities that have gone before us, there'll be a headline that says such and such city's housing element was rejected. This is not at all the case. Comment letters are quite the norm. We've received them in previous years. So it's just the regular process to respond to the state state's questions, things that they may have questions for us, asked of us to clarify things or to kind of show our homework or to show how certain sites are really feasible. So we look forward to that response letter and see where that leads us. While that is taking place, we will be bringing the housing element forward for adoption to the Planning Commission on January 2nd, and then to the City Council on January 23rd, in order to meet by the end of January 2023 deadline. Even though the state may continue to be reviewing or sending us another round of response, it is our recommendation in consultation with our consultant team to really take the document forward for adoption. And should there be any significant changes to the housing element post-adoption, we would simply bring it back. If they are very minor, it would be something that staff could change, but also can give a report to the Planning Commission and City Council in terms of what those are. So that's the overall next steps. And as a reminder, and kind of circling back to what I communicated early on in the presentation, this overall project that really began with the update of a housing element is requiring that we update our safety element and also our land use element to be consistent with those changes. In addition, for consistency with the changes, the zoning ordinance amendments. So we're going to dive deeper into what changes, accompanying changes to the land use element would be needed. We'll look at the safety element, and then we're going to look at our proposed zoning ordinance amendments a little bit more in detail during another study session that we have scheduled for on October 17th. So right now, we would like to hear from the commission if there's any questions you have, or if there's anything that right away that you think we've missed or you feel ready to talk about. We are available to have that discussion. We do have public comment on the agenda for this item too, so we could also just jump right into that before we come back, or whatever the pleasure of the commission is. This is not a public hearing item, so we have some flexibility in that. Joining me tonight is the Community and Economic Development Director, Al Savay, who can help answer questions. Adam Aronson, who's not here in person, but is here tonight, attending remotely. He is our Economic Development and Housing Manager. And then also attending remotely, we have our consultants, Lisa Brownfield and Genevieve Sharrow, available as well. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Certainly I'm well aware of the time, as you laid out in your calendar of community engagement, and which resulted in this pretty comprehensive review of the housing element. And thank you for your comments tonight. Let me check with fellow commissioners to see if there's things top of mind. And I'll say, if not, I was going to suggest we move to public comment so that maybe some of the community input might guide our discussion. But if you have something, I'm happy to hear from you. So please, Commissioner Roof.
I do have one or two kind of clarifying questions. Probably won't take too long. But the first is, what criteria were used to identify the parcels that were included in the inventory?
Yeah, so the question is, what criteria did we use to identify the parcels in the inventory? I'm going to defer that question. I think it's going to be Genevieve or Lisa. Both of them are on the line. Please feel free to answer that question.
Hi there, and thank you for having me here tonight. I'm Genevieve Sharrow with MIG. So the sites in the housing element, as Lisa went over, there's a number of different categories within them. We have the existing pipeline projects, the ADUs. Those don't have specific sites, but those involve a projection. Same with the SB9 sites. But then we did look through town for those parcels within the community that were most likely to redevelop. So these were sites largely that were also identified in the previous housing element as having a higher likelihood of redevelopment. These tended to have lower land value to, prop value to land, improvement to land value ratios were lower, where the existing uses on the site could significantly increase. If it was a residential use on site, that could significantly double, triple, or even, even far beyond that, increased density on that site. We also included anywhere where we knew that there were property owner or developer interest in particular parcels. But these are because the RHNA is so high and San Carlos is a built-out community, that we have to dig pretty deep to look for enough sites to accommodate the RHNA.
And ultimately, the state has to agree with what was included?
That is correct. The sites that we selected, in fact, that's one of the reasons we have that large appendix in the back of the housing element. The state specifically asked that we provide that, and that is one of the key areas that they are going to be reviewing. They will be closely looking at our sites to make sure that they are feasible and viable sites that could meet our RHNA.
And my second question is, for the density bonus that we approved already for change, that we approved for rental units, that allows the builder to put additional height on a building. So that's not included in the tables that additional height is not included in those tables. Is this correct?
That is correct. The height that it was proposed in the table would be our baseline zoning standard, and a developer wants to provide a project that would trigger either the state density bonus or city density bonus. They could opt to do that, and pursuant to state law, they are allowed to ask for concessions or deviations from the standards in order to get the additional density bonus units within the project. So it could mean that, maybe they need some relief from a setback standard or relief from the height requirement or the number of stories requirement. And by law, we have to give it. That is how the state density bonus law works. This is not a program that, where the city gets to have like a much discretion on it. It's, from my understanding, if a developer proposes a concession, we generally have to give it.
And so when we're trying to evaluate whether the scale that's being proposed is appropriate, we kind of have to, in our heads, because it's not in the tables, multiply by the possibility for that additional height. So it could be extra stories.
It could be an extra story, similar to what happened at 626 Walnut.
That may be reasonable. It'd be nice if that were delineated. I don't know if in some way what the maximum could be with the density bonus, because so that the community can evaluate whether that seems acceptable. If you get what I mean. It's not easy to do that, but on the other hand, just leaving it undefined lets you imagine that these buildings could be twice as high as they're saying,
Yeah, I don't think anything would double, but there could be an additional story or maybe a story and a half or something like that. One of the comments that we had heard is and even during the workshop, is that, well, what if we just lowered everything? Because let's just say everyone's going to ask for a state density bonus, but we wouldn't meet our RHNA if we lowered everything. So the proposed zoning ordinance amendments that are before the commission are the ones that are needed to meet our RHNA. So it is the 120 units to the acre at 75 feet and 6 stories. And then, it goes down from there. But essentially that would be needed to meet the RHNA figure.
So the RHNA numbers assume that the density bonus would be taken advantage of.
No, these are numbers without the density bonus.
Okay. Okay, so that's good. That gives us a
That might be upside.
Yeah, so it's upside. That's good. That's reassuring. Okay, thank you.
Maybe this is, I was going to save this, but since you've kind of done such a nice job here, David, maybe this is a question for Adam, but has there been a look at, I'll call it a judgment, the likelihood of, 25% of these properties taking advantage of it because it makes economic sense, or are we in the sweet spot that we're likely to encourage most of the projects to take advantage of the density bonus? I know it's a speculation, but it at least would be an informed one.
Hi, this is Adam Aronson, County Development Housing Manager. So I'm happy to take a stab at answering that question. I don't have concrete numbers around what sort of estimate comes to mind when these projects move forward. But I would say that what we're seeing recently is that most residential projects that are of a larger scale are trying to take advantage of the density bonus. And the smaller ones as well, but perhaps not necessarily for height in those cases. But most of the larger developments where it's more than 10 or 15 units do seem to be taking advantage of it.
Thank you. Commissioner Garvey?
And just to follow on that, Lisa, can you clarify? I think the developer has a choice. They can have a taller building, or they can decrease the amount of parking they put in the building, or they can decrease the setbacks. And it's hard to know going in. Well, they may choose the bonus, but what choice would they make in doing that? And it might be height, but I think it might be other things also. So it's really hard to factor that in, I think, yeah.
Before I respond, I just wanted to see if Al wanted to, did you have a?
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, I would just like to add to the conversation, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
so kind of adding on to what Adam was saying, there's a lot of factors that go into the decision for a developer to use the density bonus. And height is one of the factors that adds to the construction costs and the financial fees, either infeasibility or feasibility of a particular project. So the higher you go, you may need different types of construction. Maybe you go to the next level of that type of building construction, and the costs are significantly higher. And in addition, I was wondering if Adam could answer this. Under the state density bonus, there are also requirements for affordability. So the affordability of those units may change because you're saying I'm going to go more deeply affordable with this project in exchange for these concessions from the city. And that also changes the profitability or return on investment for the developer. And so on the bigger projects, as Adam mentioned, we're probably less likely to see things for height. We might see other things like setbacks, or and also things like the terrain or where it's located in relation to easements or right-of-ways and things like that. So there's the context of the project itself where they may need other things that are concessions, not necessarily height. So we've only seen, I'm not sure, I think it might be just one project, might be the 626, where we actually saw that height worked in that case. And it was actually a smaller development project. So we really don't know a whole bunch about the state density bonus law because we haven't seen a whole bunch of these projects in the state of California yet. We're starting to see them pop up in our own community, and they seem to have worked so far, and they haven't created like a big aesthetic impacts on communities throughout the state so far. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
And if I may, if there's anything that our consultants might want to add to that. If not, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's something that you feel, it's a little bit difficult that normally we make eye contact, but I'm just throwing that out there. But you can say no, Lisa and Genevieve, if you're good.
happy to add just one other thought, and that is that in our previous experiences with HCD, when assessing a site for its feasibility and the actual realistic capacity on the site, we're not able to use any density bonus units in that assumption. So it does get a little bit confusing when we're trying to present it to the state to make sure that, we do need to be clear that we can't include those density bonus units in our assumptions to meet the RHNA.
Thank you, Genevieve.
Commissioner Garvey, Commissioner Castaneda, other things you'd like to share before we move to public, please.
Yes, I'd like to know what percentage of the identified housing possibilities are located on the east side of El Camino.
I am going to defer that question to Genevieve. Genevieve, do you have that number handy by chance?
I'm going to look it up now because I did calculate it, and I apologize, I don't have it quite ready, but I will look it up and have it for you in just a minute.
Sure, thank you.
Also, if you can pull up the sites map again, you can see the sites on the east side if you need to.
Yeah, I can go to that screen. I think Commissioner Castaneda, though, not the location, but the number of units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The number that's sticking in my head is 282, but I have to look it up to make sure. So I'll just need another minute here.
The reason I'm asking the question is that particular area, we're getting a lot of industrial growth in that area, and it just seems like a good idea to have some housing there as well and facilities there as well as that density increases.
And the number is that there are 16 parcels on the east side of the railroad tracks that have been identified with an estimated capacity of 217 units total on those 16 parcels.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment on Commissioner Castaneda's point. Strategically, we are a couple of things. We're trying to meet today's RHNA, and the areas on the east side that you noted are industrial and commercial. That's correct. They're currently not zoned for housing at all. So we're going to have to allow for housing over there. We'll need to study the area comprehensively to see to look at a lot of different aspects of whether housing is compatible. We will be doing that in the northeast area of the community as part of a specific plan. And we need to think strategically as a city, because this is just 8 years. We're only talking about this 8-year cycle. So we need to look to the future as well and think about, what about how many units are we going to have to do in the next cycle? Who knows? And so thinking in the next cycle, I think we'll be looking at a lot of housing potential in the northeast area and perhaps even other areas in our city. And lastly, there is some legislation, I believe it's on the governor's desk as we speak, and it would allow for commercial areas in the state of California to automatically allow mixed-use housing development. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you all. I'm going to propose we move over to let the public share their voices. So, Lynette, do we have people that are online? And if so, why don't we have them bring their voice in?
Yes, we have 2 callers right now. Debbie is first, and Debbie, you are unmuted.
Hello, Debbie. Look forward to your comments, and if you could take 2 minutes, please, that'd be great.
Thank you. I am a San Carlos resident, and I did send a letter that other people responded to you today. Sorry for the late delivery. We thought we had until the end of the month for public comment. We were surprised that it was placed on planning and city council before then. But with that in mind, we live in an area on Carmelita which is prone to flooding. There's one site, 1785 San Carlos Avenue, that's zoned for R59, and it's planned to be zoned for R100. That site is right on the banks of Pulgas Creek. It's been subject to flooding for many years. And just for personal note, when the bike and pedestrian master plan was proposed, there was a postman's path in this area that was withdrawn from that because of the flooding in this area. So based on the fact it's on the creek, an area that's flooded, and it's an irregularly shaped lot, we would ask that be withdrawn. In addition, that directly borders single-family homes. There are 4 lots where the lot line to that property meets in the middle of the creek. So any changes to that creek bank in order to support that level of density would negatively affect us. The lot adjacent to it, it's in its natural state. It gently slopes down into the creek, and environmentalists and with rising sea level recognize that creeks do not need to be infringed upon. So that developer would have to ask for heights that could exceed 100 feet or setbacks that were all the way to the side of the lot. So that lot is inappropriate. With regard, Commissioner Roof, thank you so much for mentioning the adding to the charts, the maximum density, because if people need to know what is the maximum, if you say 4 to 6 stories, that's what they expect. But just like happened in the earlier discussion, there was a 50-foot height limit, and the exception was made to allow for 90. On 626 Walnut, the limit was 50. The allowance was 72 feet. So zoning needs to give us some certainty. So please put the maxes in there so people know that we're looking at 8 to 10 stories. And that's okay for some of those areas downtown if people want to do that, but not next to single family zoning and not next to our creeks. Please protect the riparian waterways and not allow so many setbacks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Lynette, our next caller, please.
Our next caller is David. And David, you are unmuted.
Hello, my name is David Tusman. I'm a resident of San Carlos. I want to thank staff and the consultants for their really obvious, hard, and long work on this thorough housing element, taking it seriously because we are in a serious housing crisis, as clarified by our very high RHNA number compared to last cycle to show how much more housing we do need. So a few comments. The site inventory map appears to include some lots that aren't in the text list. Most notably, there's a highlight in the image on East San Carlos Avenue, but I don't see anything of that in the table. I don't know if one of them is out of date. That would be helpful to clarify. And then more generally, I'd like to encourage staff to include more quantitative discussion and underlying data throughout the document, either in the actions or, for instance, the document lists typical processing times, but there's big ranges, like from 7 to 12 months for design review for large multifamily. It'd be more helpful to see the distribution, if not the entire data, for recent projects. Another note is for zoning ordinance amendment proposals like relaxing open space, ground floor retail, guest parking requirements. I think those are great ideas, but it's unclear what the units that it enables that maybe used to be unfeasible. It kind of ends up seeming arbitrary and doesn't really answer whether they need to go further or they're more than adequate. And then similarly, there's a point in the text that says that lot size requirements, setback requirements, FAR are not meaningful constraints. But again, there's no data to kind of show how that analysis was come to conclusion. One more quick note. I'm almost certain the SB9 units cannot be counted for RENA. 21 elements and other resources clearly state that these shouldn't be included without a track record of the city approving these permits. And San Carlos hasn't even gotten any permit applications. So that's my comment. And again, thank you for all the hard work and your time.
Thank you, David. Lynette, are there other people online?
There are no other callers at this time.
Thank you. So maybe just then to check back with fellow commissioners, are there other questions or comments that you'd like to make to give any suggestions to staff? Commissioner Garvey.
Thank you, Chair Iacopone. Just a couple of comments. Lisa, first, thanks for that presentation. That was really well done. I participated in not all, but a number of the workshops, and it seems when I read through the document that you really tried to implement what the public said about where they were comfortable with higher density near transit, higher density near downtown. And then as I look at the plan, it really seems like that's what you and your team did. And I'm pleased that not only are we able to submit a plan that meets the RENA numbers, but you've given yourself a big buffer just in case those don't happen. And I hear the caller that maybe not all of the projected SB9 lot splits that will happen, but if they don't, our buffer's big enough where that we can still meet our RENA without some of these things. So I thought the document was really responsive to what the committee wanted in the community meetings. Thank
you. Maybe a couple of thoughts from me. First is I'm really pleased about the child care goal and policy, and when we get there, watching what young people have to go through, and I'm thinking of the new workers that'll be coming in with the development of new projects, more places for working moms and dads to have ready access to safe childcare within the city will be great. So I'm really pleased for that one. And I know that we'll all benefit from, another topic, we'll all benefit from the design standards as that work evolves. And you said, Lisa, take credit for it. I think that's right. And I think that will be a big streamlining piece of activity to, let's say, circumvent debate or at least clarify what's expected, so the approval process will go more quickly. Commissioner Rowe, thank you for the point on the having what the maximum height might look like, including the greater of the city or the state density bonus. I think it is a speculation whether they'll be enacted, but to the extent there are, again, I think it's incumbent upon us that the community knows what's up, and I think that's a way to do it. So that'd be my, I would echo that suggestion. And then maybe the last thing is, in the RM 100 designation areas, one of the callers flagged what I would call an abrupt transition between a parcel and the abutting neighborhood. And it doesn't strike me as something that, all things equal, we would, if we were starting with a clean slate, we'd choose to do. Like put a 6-story that could be a 7-story building next to single-family homes with an eye shot. So first, is that only that parcel, or are there other places that could occur? And if I recall, you've talked about transition zones. So is that a missed transition zone? So maybe you could just speak to that a little, Lisa.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Iacoponi. Yes, the city currently has transitional standards in place as part of its zoning ordinance, and they are in place for the subject site that the caller referred to, that 1785 San Carlos Avenue site, and any site that adjoins a single-family zoning district. And the standard requires that the maximum height is dropped when it's within a certain distance of an RS district. So for example, what we have on the books today, or actually, let me just speak to the transitional standards that would be in play with this particular zoning amendment. So for that RM zoning district, the maximum height of the building when it's within 40 feet of an RS district would need to drop down to 40 feet. So the maximum height proposed for the RM 100 is 60 feet. So that 60 feet would need to drop down to 40 feet for the portion of the building that's within 40 feet of an RS zoning district. And then the maximum height, if it's within 50 feet of an RS district, drops to 50 feet. So I guess it could theoretically go from 60 to 50 to 40, depending upon the distance from the single-family zoning district. So that's in play. Our creek setback standards are in play, which is at least 25 feet from the top of Creek Bank. That's the way that it is written today. And then, of course, any environmental analysis that would be done on a site that requires some form of mitigation to be set back from a creek, the project would have to comply with that pursuant to CEQA. So if there's, like say, for example, there was a mitigation measure that it needed to be further than 25 feet away for whatever reason, the project would need to abide by that CEQA mitigation measure. So those are the sorts of things that could come into play. And of course, I know we talked about it before, but it remains to be seen what kind of a concession the developer may choose. Certainly height is a common one, but it could be setbacks, it could be parking, it could be some other standard that they would want relief from in order to make the project work with the number of bonus units that they would be asking for. So yes, transitional standards would continue to be in play.
I'm, I guess, put more at ease by that. And I think the last time we had this conversation about the city density bonus, I, for my part, didn't appreciate that transition requirement. And again, it might help other citizens in the community if that were emphasized a little more. Maybe probably the more important question, since we're trying to meet our RHNA, is were those transition zones and limitations factored into the inventory projection or the build-out projection so that we didn't overstate or missed the fact that we would have a transition?
Yes, they were considered when doing the site calculations and potential number of units.
Thank you.
I just had one additional comment, since there was a question about that particular property at 1785 San Carlos Avenue. Pretty unique circumstance there. There actually is a restrictive covenant on that property that limits its development to the RM 59 standards and has requirements for above the 15% to, I think it's a 20% below market rate housing as part of a component of that. That'll be part of our reporting, I think, because it's that particular property, because it has a restrictive covenant on it, is unique in the sense that the zoning can't be more than that RM 59 as of the date of the amendment to the covenant, which was in 2019.
Well, that's also good to know, and I'm sure other members of the community in that area have thought about that, so hopefully they'll take some comfort in that. And just looking at the map, it is that one little orange dot that does stand out amongst others, so good for that clarification. For my part, I have no other questions other than, again, as others said, Lisa, thank you for the presentation to try to wrap up a lot of work and a pretty hefty deck. Commissioner Castaneda, please.
I very much like the minimum density provision. I think that's excellent. And I like the locations being along the transit corridor, although as I mentioned earlier, I think it won't be enough. I think, we'll have to expand into other areas. And on the bonus info, I think we should try to provide more information. It's going to be difficult because of the different choices that the developers have. To the extent that people have statistics on what people choose, maybe some sort of a range of statistics could be given. I don't know. It might be something to look into, though. Thank you.
Commissioner Garvey.
Thank you. Just one comment about the ADUs. I think it was a policy in the packet, or Lisa, you may have said this in the presentation, to pre-approve certain ADU types so that the process could be streamlined. I think that's a good idea. I think we have a much better shot at meeting the projection for ADUs if we have a pre-approved list. I've had a couple of neighbors do ADUs, and the process is long. The city tries to speed it up, but it's still long, and if there was a pre-approved list, I think it would be faster.
Commissioner Roof.
Thank you. As far as density bonuses go, I like them. I support them because it's one of the levers we have that helps us get more below market housing, which is a dire need in our city. And I understand that with those density bonuses that the buildings might become higher and therefore a concern as to their location. But I wanted to provide a different perspective on that, in that if we restrict the density bonus to certain areas, it has the impact of concentrating the lower income housing in certain parts of town in a way that it could be problematic. And so we don't want to have a economic segregation, differentiation as a unintended consequence of doing that. Now, we have to balance that against the neighborhood compatibility issue and stuff, but I think we'll have to grapple with that. But I wanted to point out the other side of that coin in terms of restricting the density bonus geographically.
Thank you, Commissioner Roof. That is something that we absolutely have to be mindful of, is to, provide some equity in that distribution. And if it's the pleasure of the commission, we can look at that, the way that's written, and maybe incorporate some language that gets to that point.
Additional comment, I thought it was wise of the city to obtain that RSG report on the job housing balance, which was quite heartening to read, because as we bring in new industry, there's a lot of concern that we keep an appropriate balance. And in fact, the balance is working out pretty well, according to the plans, where the increase in jobs is balanced with the increase of housing that's specified in the RHNA. Assuming that it gets built, it's quite heartening that those numbers seem to imply that our city has a reasonable jobs housing balance going forward. So that's something else to highlight as a successful part of the plan.
Very good. So I guess going once, going twice, and otherwise, thank you, Lisa, and maybe nothing else on this topic for tonight.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate your comments this evening, and we will, for anyone who might be watching at home or wants another bite at this, we are going to City Council 1 week from today. Thank you.
So our next set of items, item 8, reports, correspondence, and general information. So Lisa, are there any reports on recent City Council actions?
None this evening, but I think I did mention that next week the council will consider that child care linkage fee. So just a reminder about that. And again, we're having a study session next week. So another study session on the housing element. And that would be all that I have this for this evening on that item.
Thank you. Fellow commissioners, any planning commission comments or reports? I think I would just, if it wasn't captured for the record, welcome our new commissioner, Janet Castaneda. Look forward to having you be part of this group going forward.
Thank you very much.
Item C, correspondence.
Just for the record, I did want to note, and I verified that the commissioner did receive all of the public comments that were sent in over the last several days regarding agenda item 7B tonight on the study session for the housing element. So those are all included and will be forwarded with the City Council packet. And they're part of the record. So just noting that for the record that those have been received.
Thank you, Lisa. And last, planning staff comments, reports, and any updates on current projects.
Yes, just a couple of things for the forthcoming agendas of the Planning Commission. Your next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Monday, October the 3rd. This will be a light meeting. We are going to be bringing forward Planning Commission subcommittee not recommendations, but bringing forward for the Planning Commission to consider setting some subcommittees in place. And these were discussed at the last meeting, similar to what the City Council does, elect 2 members to serve on subcommittee meetings for the downtown specific plan for the Northeast area and for housing, as an example. So that is scheduled for October 3rd. And then moving on into the month for the next meeting in October, that would be October 17th, we are looking to have a study session to describe the accompanying changes to the land use element, the environmental safety element, and other minor and associated amendments in the general plan, plus the proposed zoning changes. So we'll be able to dive into those a little bit more deeply and appreciate the comments tonight. So as maybe going forward, that would all help us kind of streamline how we want to present those changes to you. And then also on the October 17th agenda is to consider the appeal of a decision by RDRC regarding 703 Knoll Drive, a single-family housing development. So that is kind of completes the agenda items for next month. And don't think I have any other reports other than we did get City Council authorization to proceed with Perkins and Will. These will be our consultants for the Northeast area specific plan. The Commission may remember Perkins and Will, who assisted the city with the East Side Innovation District Vision Plan. They did a great job. We ended up going with them again for the Northeast Pacific Plan. So that project will kick off in October, but probably not get to the civic engagement piece for maybe a month or a couple months thereafter. There's usually some legwork to do first, and then we dive into civic engagement. So that is also coming forward. And that's all this evening.
I had a quick question. The expanded purview of the Planning Commission to cover what was previously covered by the traffic and circulation, is that something could be summarized?
Yes. In fact, great and excellent question. We are looking at the month of November to have an overview or a summary or a Transportation 101 session with the Planning Commission. This would include having our on-call transportation and traffic engineer expert attend and kind of give an overview on LOS, VMT, vehicle miles traveled, et cetera, just to kind of set the stage. And it would be a good refresher anyways. And in addition to that, our Public Works Director and City Engineer would be attending to introduce themselves. So the way it would work is that planning staff, it would be just if they had something to bring forward to the Planning Commission to get some feedback on, they would let me know. We would get it on the agenda, and then that would be an item for this commission to consider. And the commission would have an amended name. So rather than rather than Planning Commission, it would be Planning and Transportation Commission. So a new little line item for your resume, if you will. But that's coming forward in the month of November. So good question. Thanks for asking so that I could remember to let you all know. But we're going to be providing something for the commission on that.
Very good. Well, thanks again to the staff for all of the hard work on both elements tonight. And with that, we're adjourned.